what is, in fact, all over social media, people are asking, why would anybody embrace fascism? I mean, because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about fascism. There's this worldwide movement toward fascism. Rachel Maddow opened her show with it last night on MSNBC, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant. I watched it on the plane from Salt Lake City here. We had a stopover. And I think it's safety. On Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the very bottom, of course, is homeostasis. You need to breathe, you need to drink water, you need to, be able to do bodily functions, basically, maintain your body temperature, stuff like that. But right above that is safety. If you're crossing a street and all of a sudden cars are whizzing by you in both directions, you're not thinking about, what you're going to have for dinner or what you want to do with your career goals or whether you should propose to your new girlfriend or what. I mean, what you're thinking about is, how do I avoid getting hit by a car? And what has happened over the last 40 years as part of the Reagan Revolution and in response to the Powell memo, Lewis Powell's memo, is that there has been this huge right-wing infrastructure built, and I would call it a neo-fascist infrastructure, frankly, because they're all promoting fascism. Not necessarily pure Nazism, but something damn close. And, that includes 1,500 right-wing radio stations, that includes, if you look at the top podcasts, the top 100 podcasts, like the top 40 of them, at least 2/3 of them are right-wing podcasts. There's enormous money behind these. They promote them like crazy. They on social media, they get promotion. You've also got, the owners and people running many of the social media sites are themselves billionaires and conservatives, and so they're pushing these memes as well. And so now what you have is kind of latent racism that has had a fire lit under it by the destruction of the American middle class. We've gone, and largely the white middle class, although since the 60s there was a growing black middle class and a Hispanic middle class as well. And all have taken a hit. The blacks and Hispanics have been hit harder than the whites, but the whites have been hit hard enough that, the middle class in America has gone from 65% of us when Reagan came into office to 45% of us today. So you've got, that 20% that got screwed, the title of one of my books, The Undeclared War on the Middle Class. And these people who have not literally been screwed if you use some of the definitions, but I'd say, financially they've been screwed. And, they know it, they're just not sure why. And so you've got this huge media structure around the country that kind of started with Limbaugh on radio. It started with Rupert Murdoch, the Australian billionaire on television, that have a very simple answer for these largely white people who have been financially screwed by 40 years of Reaganism. They're saying, okay, who did this to me? Why does my job pay half of what I paid in 1980? And the answer these people will say is, it's because black people want your job. It's because brown-skinned immigrants want your job. It's because women want your job. And if we could just go back to, pre-1965, when women had to have a man's permission to get a credit card or open a checking account, when women generally could not enter the workforce unless it was a secretary, when black people were relegated to very specific jobs, janitors and things like that, and by and large separated from the rest of society. We had segregated water fountains. We still had segregated schools. If we could just go back to that, society would stabilize itself. This was Russell Kirk's great theory. He wrote a book about this called The Conservative Mind, From Burke to Eliot. And it starts out with Edmund Burke, and they've also got, all these radio stations and podcasts and everything. Interesting, I believe it was the Brennan Center did this study. It was published last week. I mentioned this briefly on Friday, that some of these right-wing podcasts are 11 times more likely to have lies in them than our left-wing podcasts. 11 times. That's 11,000%, right? Or 1,100% more lies. And, you wonder why people are acting crazy. You wonder why people are so angry. You wonder why people have gone so nuts. Simple answer is they're being lied to. They're being told that they are not safe. Now, they know financially they're not safe, but they're being told that that lack of safety is the result of Democrats, of liberals, of queer people, of black people, and of women. And therefore, they need to go after those people. And thus, we've got all these white guys strutting around with AR-15s strapped across their chests, wearing Confederate flags. Surprise, surprise. What do you think? In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. Here's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
From Thomas Frank's book, Rendezvous with Oblivion, Reports from a Sinking Society. This is chapter 1, titled Servile Disobedience. Social scientists have tried for more than a century to understand how class works. Psychological experiments on the subject, however, are a relatively novel thing, so I was surprised to discover a few years ago that psychologists had published a series of papers on the behavioral aspects of social status, and that their findings were almost uniformly unflattering towards society's winners. In one 2009 study in Psychological Science found that in conversations with strangers, high-status people tend to do more doodling and fidgeting, and also to use fewer engagement cues, looking at the other person, laughing, nodding their heads. A 2010 paper published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that lower-class individuals, in quote, turned out to be better performers on measures of such pro-social virtues as generosity, charity, and helpfulness. A third study found that those of higher status were noticeably worse at assessing the emotions of others or figuring out what facial expressions mean. All of which is to say the rich are different from you and me. They are more rude and less generous. They don't understand, they don't get what others are thinking, and apparently they don't really care. Perhaps this is obvious to you. After all, people don't design toxic debt obligations by calling out what they learned in Sunday school. Still, the research aroused media interest. The Christian Science Monitor's 2010 account of one study ended with this quotation from Michael Krauss, then the University of California, San Francisco, who was one of the researchers, quote, "Being empathic is one of the first steps to helping other people. One of the first things we're really interested in is what can make wealthy people, affluent people, the people with the capacity to give, what can make them empathic?" I think I see the urgency of Dr. Krauss's question. After all, we have spent the past several decades doing everything we could to transfer the wealth of the nation into the bank accounts of the affluent to send them victorious, happy, and glorious long to reign after us. Oh, we've cut their taxes, gladly transferring much of the cost of keeping their property safe onto our own shoulders. We've furnished them with special megaphones so that their voices can be heard over the hubbub of the crowd. We've conferred upon them separate and better schools, their very own transportation system, and a full complement of private security guards. We've built an entire culture of courtiers and sycophants to make their every working hour an otherworldly delight. We let them construct a system of bonuses and executive compensation on the theory that it would be good for everyone if the people at the top got to take home much, much more than the rest of us. And when it turned out that the theory was wrong, that in the most famous cases, executives chased bonuses not to the shareholders' benefit, but at their expense, why, we promptly bailed them out. We allowed them to step into the Fed's discount window and fill their pockets. We generously transferred their reckless investments to our balance sheet, and we chastised them with little more than a polite request that they please not do it again. We've done everything we can to lift them up and exalt them as the new Leviathan. The least they can do in return, one feels, is to show a little empathy. Besides, look what we've done with the old Leviathan, the government. For decades, we've attacked it, redirected it, outsourced it, and filled it with incompetence and cronies. Yes, it still works well enough when we need to blow up some small country, but those branches of it designed to help our Americans of lower socioeconomic status, in quotes, as the scientists would put it, are now bare. We need the rich to be nice. We need them to stop doodling pain and to pay attention and get generous. Now that the government has divested from the empathy business, we need the rich to discover brotherly love and fast. Come to think of it, wasn't that supposed to be the deal in the first place? The arrangement Andrew Carnegie brokered over a century ago when he made his big career move from Steel King to public library baron? The laissez-faire social contract would grant private business a free hand, but in exchange, those who piled up massive wealth were supposed to extend a magnanimous hand to the rest of us. As Carnegie wrote in his famous 1889 essay, The Gospel of Wealth, we don't need socialism to solve our problems. Philanthropy is the true antidote for the temporary inequality distribution of wealth and reconciliation of the rich and poor, quoting Carnegie. Going further, Carnegie argued that the duty of the man of wealth was, quote, to consider all surplus revenues which come to him simply as trust funds, which he's called upon to administer in the manner which, in his judgment, is best calculated to produce the most beneficial results for the community, the man of wealth thus becoming the mere trustee and agent for his poorer brethren, end quote. That same way of thinking led Carnegie to support the estate tax. Of all forms of taxation, this seems the wisest, he wrote. It was wise because it would, quote, induce the rich man to attend to the administration of wealth during his life. And if he didn't, then the tax would return most of his hoardings to the community from which it came, using Carnegie's words. Vestiges of the Carnegie attitude survive to this day. 2009 study of high net worth individuals by Barclays Wealth confirmed that American philanthropists tend to understand their giving in a context in which the state is either absent or irrelevant. And of course, there are plenty of nice plutocrats who don't fidget or doodle when talking to strangers and who have no problem endowing a ward or a wing in return for a commemorative plaque. The business headlines even occasionally tell of billionaires coming together under the leadership of Warren Buffett and Bill Gates to donate their fortunes to worthy causes. But the billionaires with the strongest sense of class solidarity have a very different for their disposable income, activating their lobbyists in Washington, building grassroots movements to march on their behalf, and using their media power.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, happy Tuesday. A lot going on in the world today. Is Senator Dick Durbin going to stop the blue slip scam that is being used to block Democratic judges? I'll get to that in a moment. Louisville is mourning more dead people from another mass shooter who bought his guns legally. In Kentucky, it's like, the wild, wild west. Or Louisville is Tennessee, isn't it, actually? Nashville and... No, it's Kentucky. Okay, thank you. I constantly mix those two states up, have my whole life. Anyway, is the NRA designed to fortify for a race war? What's up with the NRA? I'll tell you about that in the first hour also. And a revenge alert. Mr. Gymnasium Jordan is heading to New York City to officially be a hypocrite. It's a fascinating story. I'll tell you about that, too. In the second hour of our program, how Republicans just lost Gen Z, and also welcome to the new care for pregnant women in red states. Thoughts and prayers are what they're being offered as they bleed to death. Also, how Republicans have been busy. This is an interesting take. In our third hour, our only guest in the entire program today, Dr. Gabor Mate, is going to drop by about his new book, The Myth of Normal, which really resonates with me. I have never, ever thought there was anything that was, normal is just a social construct. Anyway, we'll talk about that in the third hour. Also, the Florida Senate is advancing a bill that would let Ron DeSantis conceal information about his travel and his lobbying activities and his fundraising activities. And in fact, it would apply retroactively to trips he's taken in the past. What could possibly go wrong? And science tells us how to make the healthiest kimchi. And even if you don't enjoy Korean food, why you should know about this. So a lot to talk about today, plus, your calls at 202-808-9925. But let me start with today's op-ed. This is, it's over at HartmannReport.com. And it's titled, Will Senator Dick Durbin Stop the Blue Slip Scam Blocking Democratic Judges? And here's the story. And there's a backstory here that literally goes back to George Washington. Right now, you've got a number of Democratic nominees for judgeships that are being blocked in the Senate by Republican senators. For example, Cindy Hyde-Smith is blocking a judicial nominee by the name of Scott Collum. Last year, Republican Senator Ron Johnson blue slip vetoed Judge William Pocan, who is the brother of our friend Mark Pocan. They're both gay, and apparently Ron Johnson blue slipped him, vetoed him because he's gay. Roger Marshall and Jerry Moran are bragging that they're going to veto Biden's nomination of Jabari Womble for federal district judge in Kansas because presumably he's black. Now, I called all 5 of Dick Durbin's offices yesterday. Dick Durbin is the senator who is in charge of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and basically, he has the choice. If Cindy Hyde-Smith or Roger Marshall or Jerry Moran want to send back a blue slip that says I don't support this candidate, Dick Durbin has a choice. He can take that blue slip seriously and veto that candidate and not send their nomination to the floor of the Senate. Or he can say, okay, cool, you don't like this person, I'll append a note to our recommending this to the entire Senate for a vote. He's choosing to allow Republicans to veto Democratic nominees. Now, what is this whole blue slip thing? Where did this start? Where did this come from? The backstory here starts in 1789. On August 3rd, 1789, President George Washington sent a list of people who, these were officer commissions. Those are also being held up in the Senate right now. They require senatorial approval for a different reason and in a different way. But in any case, George Washington sent a list of naval officers to the Senate, and for the home state senators, each state had 2 senators, still does, for the home state senators to say yes or no to these people. Now, the reason they did this was because if you're George Washington living in Washington, D.C. or Mount Vernon, Virginia, or you're the senator from Massachusetts, or you're the senator from Connecticut, you have no way of knowing in 1789 who this guy is, Benjamin Fishburne of Georgia, who the president has nominated for, a military promotion or for a judgeship. You just have no way of knowing. There was no internet, there's no Wikipedia, there's no mass media. They hadn't even invented the telegraph at that point. There were no national newspapers. So it made perfect sense that if you're the president or if you're other senators, that when a nominee is brought forward from, a state, that you would go to the 2 senators from that state and say, what do you think of this guy? Is he any good? Or is he, a nut job? Is he a drunk? Is he a felon? Is he just a general ass? Should we be considering him or not? And if one of the home state senators says no, then, don't advance that, out of an abundance of caution, don't advance that nomination. And in fact, what happened was Senator James Gunn of Georgia objected to Benjamin Fishburne being nominated by George Washington for this military promotion. Now, the reason he objected was because Fishburne had supported Senator Gunn's opponent, Major General Nathaniel Greene, in a duel that Gunn had challenged Greene to. Gunn walked around for a whole year with a pistol in his belt because he kept hoping that he would run into Green so he could shoot him. And Fishburne had publicly, basically ridiculed Gunn for this attempted duel. So Gunn vetoed Fishburne. Now, George Washington was seriously pissed off about this. He walked over to the Senate chamber and confronted Gunn and said, "Why are you doing this? Why are you vetoing my nominee?" And Gunn said, under the under the consent and advice clause, the advice and consent clause of the Constitution, it's my obligation to advise and consent or withhold my consent. I'm withholding my consent and I'm giving you advice. Don't give this guy a military commission. And Washington said, why? And Senator Gunn said, I don't have to tell you. The advice and consent clause does not require me to give you a reason. Now, because you're the president and because I respect you, I will tell you my reason. My reason is I don't like this guy. But I don't have an obligation to tell you. And that incident in August of 1789 established the precedent that today we refer to as blue slips. And from 1789 up until around 1917, a paper would be distributed from the president about his nominees, and home state senators could object. And generally speaking, the Senate Judiciary Committee respected those objections and didn't let those nominees out, didn't let them go to the floor of the Senate for a vote. Now, this is not a law. It's not even in the Constitution. The Constitution does not mention anything about this. This is a tradition. It's not even a Senate rule. It's a tradition. There's nothing binding to this. In 1917, 105 years ago, Congress tweaked it a little bit, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. They started passing out that letter saying, what do you think about this guy? Printed on a blue piece of paper. And if it was returned with a no, now starting in 1917, see, this was when radio had become a thing. There were now two national radio networks, the Red Network and the Blue Network, which ultimately became CBS and NBC. And there were nationwide newspapers by 1917. So people knew who people were. And so in 1917, they stopped vetoing people, even when they were objected to by the home state senators. And they simply noted, when they passed that nomination along to the floor of the Senate, simply noted, hey, one of the home state senators says don't vote for this guy. Which would hurt, but it wasn't a veto. And that stood from 1917, where they did it on blue pieces of paper and they started referring to it as blue slips. That stood until 1955, when Senator James Eastland, the notorious white supremacist, became chair of the Judiciary Committee. Now, 2 years earlier, in 1954, the Supreme Court had ordered public schools to be desegregated, to be integrated racially. And Eastland wanted to make sure that no federal judge would be appointed to the federal bench, who would support the Supreme Court's decision in that regard. And so he went back to saying, if a home state senator suspects that one of these judicial nominees might support the Supreme Court's integration order, we will respect that as a veto in the committee. So from 1956 until 1979, while James Eastland was head of the committee, if somebody blue slipped a nominee, if they said no on a blue slip to the nominee, that nominee was toast. It never got out of committee. Now, in 1979, Ted Kennedy came along. He replaced Eastland, and he said, no, we're going to go back to the way it was before 1955. We'll simply tell people somebody objected, but it won't kill the nomination. In 2001, though, Orrin Hatch became the chair, and he went back to James Eastland's rule. And Pat Leahy, when he became the chair in 2003, he followed Eastland's rule, which provoked a 2014 outraged op-ed in the New York Times, official editorial in the New York Times, calling out Leahy for doing this. Now, then in 2019, Lindsey Graham becomes chairman, and he says, we're going to ignore blue slips from Democrats. And that's how they push through a lot of these crazy Republicans that are on the bench right now. They just ignored the Democrats' blue slips. Well, now the head of the Judiciary Committee is Dick Durbin, the senator from Illinois. And he's gone back to doing what James Eastland was doing, which is allowing Republicans to veto Democratic nominees simply because they feel like it. So I'm encouraging people to reach out to Dick Durbin, particularly if you live in Illinois. I was not able to reach any of his offices yesterday. Nobody answered the phone at any of them. But, you know, if you live in the state, maybe they'll answer your phone. Maybe they'll recognize your phone number. Or you can email them. You know, there's other ways to contact the senator. You can tweet him. Let him know what you think about this. I think this is just a travesty.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's time for Democrats to stand up to Republicans. I mean, come on, give me a break. And welcome back. Tim in Aloha, Oregon. Hey, Tim, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching Free Speech TV. Tim in Aloha, you're on the air? Maybe
Hello?
not. Hey, Tim, what's up?
Yeah, you know, Tom, I just wanted to give you an update. I just turned the TV on. I try to get a perspective of what's going on in the news. This Louisville shooting yesterday, you know, among the number of things that are going on in this country. But the mayor, the police chief, and the congressman both are all on CNN and MSNBC Live, giving a breakdown of how they'd like to proceed. And Fox News is talking about the criminal aspects of the FBI and how Newsom is going to be running for president.
Oh,
you know, this whole thing with the Dominion lawsuit, all they're trying to do is they're doubling down so they can draw more funding to pay off that lawsuit, and they're not going to change their ideology at all because it's just dollars and cents, basically what's going on.
Well, and it's also fascist ideology that has been held by Murdoch and his buddies for years. I mean, just ask Kevin
Koch
Rudd.
Industries and the Mercers and so forth. Yeah, I understand that, but people just don't get it, and what they know is they can still appeal to that base, who every time they see a massive shooting, the key element in their ideology is that the Democrats are going to take their guns away from them.
Right.
That's the basic ideology. It's
and
really
Democrats
scary.
are going to, and they should. I mean, I think it's really that simple. We should ban assault weapons. I think we should ban all semi-automatic weapons. Frankly, but at the very least, let's ban assault weapons.
What alternative do we have? See, that's the point.
It's worked in every other country in the world. I mean, you know, Australia was having mass shootings every 2 or 3 years, and finally, after a horrible one in Port Arthur, Tasmania, in I believe it was 89 or 98. No, it was 1998. They said enough, and you know, they banned assault weapons. They banned semi-automatic weapons nationwide. They did a nationwide gun buyback. They bought back over 800,000 guns, took them out of circulation. They've had one mass shooting in the 25 years since then.
Now what you need to do is give Marjorie Taylor Greene those statistics. You see what I mean?
She doesn't care.
That's what
she doesn't care about the statistics. She just, you know, she just wants to join the NRA and trying to encourage a racial war in the United States. She is lobbying for her national divorce call is actually a call for a race war in the United States. And the NRA has been pushing this for years.
There's no question about it, along with Matt Gaetz and all the rest of them, and Gomers and Cruz.
Yep.
I mean, you could just bring the list down.
They literally want a civil war that is at its core a racial war. That's what these white supremacist Republicans are calling for. It's what the NRA is calling for.
Right, because that's the only way they figure they can proceed or continue, you know, in the next generation.
Because the voters are rejecting it.
That's the base. That's the base they're building up. You know, that's no question about it. What they're trying to do with education and consumer rights and voters' rights and gerrymandering and redistricting, they want that next generation. You see, they're planning in the future, because why are they going to want to give up the billions of dollars they've already invested in trying to destroy this planet? You see what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the scary part.
Yeah. No, it's.
So I just figured I'd give you an update, but it's not typically news, but that's the most relevant thing. And as far as the news goes today, it just gives you the whole ideology of Fox News and the actual power they have over the media in this country. That's the scary part.
Yeah, it's tremendous, and in the UK and in Australia. I mean, Rupert Murdoch has basically ruled all three of these nations' conservative parties with an iron fist. And
yeah, I want to follow the ideology of a 91-year-old racist. That's what I want to do.
Yeah. You saw he just dumped his fiancée.
I'm
She's too
crushed.
Christian. Tim, thank you for the call. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. The unborn are a convenient group of people to advocate for. They never make demands of you. They are morally uncomplicated, unlike the incarcerated, addicted, or chronically poor. They don't resent your condescension or complain that you're not politically correct, unlike widows. They don't want you to question patriarchy. Unlike orphans, they don't need money, education, or child care. Unlike aliens, they don't bring all that racial, cultural, and religious baggage that you dislike. They allow you to feel good about yourself without any work at creating or maintaining relationships. And when they're born, you can forget about them because they cease to be unborn. Prisoners, immigrants, the sick, the poor, widows, orphans, all the groups that are specifically mentioned in the Bible, they all get thrown under the bus for the unborn. This is a quote from a commentary written by Pastor Dave Barnhart of the United Methodist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. And it is so worth hearing. That was just part of it. The whole thing is in a video over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. Okay, so what's up with the NRA? This is a fascinating take. In fact, I've been thinking that I should write a little more in-depth op-ed about this, but maybe for tomorrow. I don't know. It's been kicking around the back of my brain here. Bill Weir is a reporter for CNN, and he was being interviewed about Greg Abbott's move to pardon Daniel Perry. Daniel Perry is a soldier who showed up in his car at a Black Lives Matter protest when his car was approached by a black protester who was armed, who had a rifle. When his car was approached, he rolled down the window, pulled out his pistol, and shot the guy dead. He was convicted of murder by a jury of his peers, has not yet been sentenced, I believe. And Greg Abbott says, we should probably pardon this guy. After all, he's a white guy who killed a black man in a BLM protest. I mean, what could be more all American and Republican? And, Bill Weir says, he starts talking about Harlan Carter. Now, I've written about Harlan Carter. I've talked about Harlan Carter. Most people don't know anything about him. Harlan Carter was a guy who lived back down on the border, the area around the Texas-Mexico border back in the 1950s. And near or on his property, he murdered a 15-year-old Mexican kid with a shotgun, killed him in cold blood, and was convicted of that murder. He was released from jail 2 years early because the judge failed to instruct the jury that there could have been a self-defense claim. And so Harlan Carter, after he got out of prison for murdering a Mexican kid, 15-year-old, went on to become the president of the National Rifle Association. And he was the guy who changed the NRA in the 1970s from a marksman, sportsman, gun safety organization into an organization that has been championing arming white people for a coming race war ever since. Bill Weir says this is like canonizing the Kyle Rittenhouses of the world. He says his messages were there. Perry posted that day. He's talking about the guy that the governor wants to pardon. One day saying, I may have to kill a few people on my way to work. They're riding outside my apartment complex. I might go to Dallas to shoot looters. Right. I mean, this is pretty straightforward stuff. The NRA has become, in my opinion, something akin to a terrorist organization in the United States. Certainly many Americans are terrorized by their actions. What say you?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
On the other side of the break, I have a revenge alert for you about Jim Jordan, and I'll pick up your calls. Thom Hartmann Book Club today, it's Waking the Witch, Reflections on Women, Magic, and Power by Pam Grossman. This is from the introduction. Witches have always walked among us, populating societies and storyscapes across the globe for thousands of years. From Circe to Hermione, from Morgan Le Fay to Marie Laveau, the witch has long existed in the tales we tell about ladies with strange powers who can harm or heal. And although people of all genders have been considered witches, it's a word that is now usually associated with women. Throughout most of history, she has someone to fear, an uncanny other who threatens our safety or manipulates reality for her own mercurial purposes. She's a pariah, a persona non grata, a boogie woman to defeat and discard. Although she's often been deemed a destructive entity, in actuality, a witchy woman has historically been far more susceptible to attack than an inflictor of violence herself. As with other terrifying outsiders, she occupies a paradoxical role in cultural consciousness as both vicious aggressor and vulnerable prey. Over the past 150 years or so, however, the witch has done another magic trick by turning from a fright into a figure of inspiration. She is now as likely to be the heroine of your favorite TV show as she is its villain. She might show up in the form of your Wiccan co-worker or the beloved musician who gives off a sorceress vibe in videos or on stage. There's also a chance that she is you, and that witch is an identity you've taken upon yourself for any number of reasons, heartfelt or flippant, public or private. Today, more women than ever are choosing the way of the witch, whether literally or symbolically. They're floating down catwalks and sidewalks in gauzy black clothing and adorning themselves with Pinterest-worthy pentagrams and crystals. They're filling up movie theaters to watch witchy films and gathering in back rooms and backyards to do rituals, consult tarot cards, and set life-altering intentions. They're marching in the streets with Hex the Patriarchy placards and casting spells each month to try to constrain the commander-in-chief. Year after year, articles keep proclaiming it's the season of the witch, as journalists try to wrap their heads around the mushrooming witch trend. And all of this begs the question, why? Why do witches matter? Why are they seemingly everywhere right now? What exactly are they? And why the hell won't they go away? I get asked such things over and over, and you would think that after a lifetime of studying and writing about witches, as well as hosting a witch-themed podcast and being a practitioner of witchcraft myself, my answers would be succinct. In fact, I find that the more I work with the witch, the more complex she becomes. Hers is a slippery spirit. Try to pin her down and she'll only recede further into the dark, deep wood. I do know this for sure, though. Show me your witches, and I'll show you your feelings about women. The fact that the resurgence of feminism and the popularity of the witch are ascending at the same time is no coincidence. The two are reflections of each other. That said, this current witch wave is nothing new. I was a teen in the 1990s, the decade that brought us such pop culture as Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Charmed, and The Craft. Not to mention riot girls and third-wave feminists who taught me that female power could come in a variety of colors and sexualities. I learned that women could lead a revolution while wearing lipstick and combat boots, and sometimes even a cloak. But my own witchly awakening came at an even earlier age. Morganville, New Jersey, where I was raised, was a solidly suburban town, but it retained enough natural land features back then to still feel a little bit scruffy in spots. We had a small patch of woods in our backyard that abutted a horse farm, and the two were separated by a wisp of running water that we could cross via a plank of wood. When we were little, my older sister Emily and I would sometimes venture to the other side where we could feed the horses, an act that still scares me to this day, fistfuls of clover. But the majority of our time was spent on our side of the stream, threading ourselves through the thicket of trees that served as our personal forest. In one corner of the yard, a giant puddle would form whenever it rained, surrounded by a border of ferns. We called this spot our magical place. That it would vanish and then reappear only added to its mystery. It was a portal to the unknown. These woods are where I first remember doing magic, entering that state of deep play where imaginative action. I would spend hours out there creating rituals with rocks and sticks, drawing secret symbols in the dirt, losing all track of time. It was a space that felt holy and wild, yet still strangely safe. As we age, we're supposed to stop filling our heads with such nonsense. Unicorns are to be traded in for Barbie dolls, though both are mythical creatures to be sure. We lose our tooth fairies, walk away from our wizards. Dragons get slain on the altar of our youth. Most kids grow out of their magic phase. I grew further into mine. My grandma Trudy was a librarian at the West Long Branch Library, which meant I got to spend many a long afternoon lurking between the 001.9 and 135 Dewey Decimal sections, reading about Bigfoot and dream interpretation in Nostradamus. Waking the Witch by Pam Grossman. Biohack Your Brain by Kristen Wilhammer, PhD. Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you could be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out. 34 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. I hate it when I get details wrong. I take so much pride in this show being something that you can quote, you can take to the bank, you can share with your friends without fear of being contradicted. And I got a detail wrong in the last segment. The fellow who was shot in Texas by Mr. Perry, the killer that Greg Abbott wants to pardon, I said he was black. He was white. He was pushing the wheelchair of his black fiancée. And my apologies for having mixed that up in my brain. I knew there was a racial piece to it, and thanks to those of you who called to tell Joyce to tell me, hey, you got that wrong. You're absolutely right. So, meanwhile, Jim Jordan, he didn't, he tried to intimidate Alvin Bragg, right? I'm a member of the United States Congress, and I'm the head of this committee on weaponizing government, and you, sir, are merely a district attorney in New York City, and a black one at that. So I'm going to put you in your place. Jim Jordan does everything but call Alvin Bragg boy. But Bragg just threw it back in his face and said, no, I'm not coming to D.C. to testify for your committee, and you do not have control over me. You don't regulate me. Sorry, that's, you're federal, I'm state. I answer to the people of the city of New York, or the city of New York. In fact, he's not even state, he's city. He's the district attorney for the city of New York. And so Jim Jordan, not getting his way, not having succeeded in intimidating Alvin Bragg, has decided he's going to show up in his backyard. He's going to bring his circus to New York City next week, April 17th. And he's going to be, quote, focusing on how Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's pro-crime, anti-victim policies have led to an increase in violent crime in a dangerous community for New York City residents. And I'm sure that they believe that crap over on Fox so-called news. But let's look at reality for a moment here. As Alvin Bragg pointed out, New York City does not even make the list of the 65 most dangerous cities in America. It is the biggest city in America, but it does not even make the list of the 65 most dangerous based on homicide rates. In fact, this is the list from 2019, the last data that we have. Jim Jordan's home state of Ohio. Dayton, Ohio was number 5. Again, New York was not even on the list. New York City. Cleveland was number 10. Cincinnati was number 19. Akron was number 49. Toledo was 57. In Toledo, they have a murder rate of 12.43 people per 100,000 residents. In New York, it's 3.5 per 100,000. So Toledo has about, 4 to 5 times more murders than New York City? one of the 5 lowest gun death states in the nation. You see this trend right across the board. Blue states with strong gun laws have low gun homicide rates. Red states with lax gun laws or no gun laws have very high gun homicide rates. It's the guns, stupid. The states with the 5 states with the highest homicide death rates are Mississippi, Wyoming, Louisiana, Alaska, Missouri, and Alabama. None of them are New York. These are the deadliest states to live in if you're concerned about being murdered with a gun. And yet Jim Jordan wants to go to New York City to crime and violence. It doesn't get any weirder than that. I mean, this just tells you everything you need to know about Republicans. All righty, picking up your calls, your thoughts on this and all these other things. Rahib in Los Angeles. Hey, Rahib, thanks for listening to KPFK. What's up?
Hey, Tom. It's a pleasure to talk to you, sir. Just wanted to give you my theory of why this country has such a problem giving up their guns. I don't believe that it's a Second Amendment issue. I believe that the Europeans who now call themselves Americans have done so much dirt, not only here in the Western Hemisphere, but all over the world in terms of murders. They got so much blood on their hands that I believe that they are afraid the chickens will come home to roost. In other words, they are deathly afraid to give up their guns for fear that one of these countries that they've stepped on and manipulated for all these years back seeking revenge. What is your thought?
Respectfully, I disagree. I think that they're more concerned about black people seeking revenge for 400 years of, discrimination, slavery, Jim Crow, all that kind of thing. I think that
that's part of it.
Yeah, I don't think they're worried that Honduras is going to invade the United States. Or any other country, frankly, but they are
not Mexico. They've done a lot of dirt in Mexico.
Oh yeah, no, there are problems there, but I don't think anybody seriously thinks Mexico is going to invade the United States, and there's not even any serious talk about that in Mexico. But I do think that what you have in the Republican Party are a bunch of white racists who are still trying to maintain the traditions of the Old South. They're trying to hold down black people in particular, and also other minorities as well, gender minorities, the queer community. They're trying to hold them down. They're going after drag queens. They're going after, they're going after women and their ability to control their own bodies, to have an abortion. This is all about white male power, period. And they now are to the point where they're being rejected at the ballot box so often and so vigorously that they feel that the only way that they can seize and maintain their power is with guns, threats of violence.
Yeah. I have to agree with you.
Okay.
Thanks for taking the call.
All right. Thanks, Rahid. Beachside Bill in Orlando. Hey, Bill, what's on your mind today?
Oh, afternoon, Tom, and I thank you for taking my call, and everything that you said I agree with. There's a story that came out late last week, if I remember correctly. It was on the Pentagon, had a document leak. And I saw something else on it this morning, and I thought, well, if you just go 100 miles south of me here to Mar-a-Lago, and this is just a guess, where the document leaks, you go back a year and a half, and before, when it was all exposed. And I remember calling you then, and I said something to the effect of, everybody has a cell phone, right? All the tourists, everybody who was in and out before and they didn't need to steal any documents. No one did. They could just take pictures of them. Yeah. And I'm thinking, and again, this is just a guess, and this is a big document leak for Ukraine, and it's a serious breach of what they're saying. And I don't know if you've been following it. What do you think?
Well, the problem with your theory, Bill, and first of all, let me predicate this by saying I'm of the opinion that Donald Trump has already sold some of those documents that he stole. I think it's one of the reasons why we're seeing spies being murdered, apparently by Russians. I think it's one of the reasons that Mohammed bin Salman was able to stage a coup in Saudi Arabia and take over the entire country. I think that some of those documents were given to him by Jared Kushner, via Donald Trump. And I think that Donald Trump has been monetizing those documents, and that's why his family has received, closing in on now $3 billion from these Middle Eastern countries. That said, I don't think this particular document leak is part of that. And the reason why is because the documents that were leaked are from January of this year. And Trump hasn't had access to those documents for 2 years.
Well, he claims he can. He had executive privilege. He has the. Well, it was just a guess. I didn't follow up on him, but maybe I stand corrected then. But it was just a guess. Well,
I think your instincts are right, Bill. If Trump can make a buck, or if Trump can screw the country, he will leap at the opportunity. Your instincts are absolutely right. It's just you just missed that one detail.
Yeah. And one quick thing on Dick Durbin, I agree with you, and I've said this to you before. The Senate Judiciary Committee has subpoena power. Why not call Ginny and Clarence up there? Why not call Trump Street flunkies up there? They have the power to do it. Invite them. And why not John Roberts? Because it's his court. What do you think?
Yep.
He's the spokesman.
It's also his wife who's making $1 million a year. His wife is making $1 million a year off the fact that her husband is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, who paid off Brett Kavanaugh's gambling debts, and paid for his house. Who's paying for Sam Alito's luxury vacations all around the world? Yeah. We now know one of the people paying for Clarence Thomas's vacations and trips, but who are the others? We know that him and Scalia used to go to Koch brothers events all the time. I mean, this is like, this goes way beyond something's rotten in Denmark. I mean, something's rotten. So,
Roberts Court,
Yeah, there you go. Roberts Court. Yep. Mr. Roberts should be brought before the Judiciary Committee. I agree with you, Bill. Bill, thank you very much. We'll be right back. It's 45 minutes past the hour. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls right after this. It's the Thom Hartmann program, fair and only slightly unbalanced. And welcome back, Dennis in Aptos, California. Hey, Dennis, what's on your mind today?
Well, plenty. I was in the UK, by the way, for nearly 3 weeks in March. Got a lot to say about how perhaps life is actually better there than here. But Durbin, I have no confidence in Durbin at all.
Why?
He's been one of the Democrats that have been weak on Republicans.
Yeah.
And I don't see him doing anything about these blue slips. The guy who should be the judiciary chair is Sheldon Whitehouse. I
agree.
He would have already done it. Yeah. He is a Democrat that stands up for law and order and what's right versus what's wrong.
Yeah, that's why I wanted him as Attorney General.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, Trump might be already in sitting in Trump Tower and under house arrest already.
Yeah. There's no doubt in my mind that if Sheldon Whitehouse had been made Attorney General in 2020, in January 2021, instead of Merrick Garland, that we wouldn't have spent 2 years just twiddling our thumbs and pissing away an opportunity to put Trump in jail.
Yeah. And, I'm going to tell you, though, going away for a couple of weeks and leaving this country and seeing how things are, and that was probably my fourth or fifth trip over there. The public transportation, so much better. Even where it's not that good, it's still better than here.
Everybody has health care. Everybody can go to college. Yeah. I mean, they've got their problems, but...
Yeah. Oh, they do. Another thing, though, that I got to say is the amount of land. And, you have to say the aristocracy did a lot of this a long time ago. They were so mean to people, but they did some good things. And they set aside land for parks, for open space.
Yeah.
There's all this open space. And we're in the train. I'm in the train with my girlfriend, and I said, we passed by this piece of land. There's like 4 or 5 rugby pitches, 4 or 5 soccer pitches, a couple of cricket pitches, and I said to her, if some American developer saw that, he'd say, geez, that should be 20 condos and a huge shopping center, right. Because that's what happens here to open land so often. It's not for public use. It's for private use and for people to make millions and billions on. And it's really sad.
Yeah. I'm guessing that the United Kingdom is struggling with their version of our developers. Did you, by the way, you were there recently. What was the situation with regard to COVID, airport, plane, hotel, traveling around?
Glad you asked. I guess more people got vaccinated there. I still haven't researched that, but I believe they did. No one's wearing masks. I went there. I wore a mask on the plane going over there. We were wearing it kind of early in our trip, and then we just didn't see anybody wearing them, and then we didn't really wear them the rest of the way. I got back home. I didn't get sick or anything.
That's
so
great.
Knock on wood. But I don't know. I have to think that maybe they just got. I know some of these Western European countries had high vaccination rates, like up to 70, 80%. Right. I think Portugal might have been the number one. They were like 90% two years ago.
I think we're reaching herd immunity, it seems. Yeah.
I think we are.
Yeah. Okay, Dennis, thanks. Thanks for the report. Thanks for the information and your thoughts. It's always nice talking with you. I appreciate the call. It's 49 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Well, it appears that American business has a cranky right-wing billionaire problem. This is really getting bad. Tesla fired dozens of their workers at their Buffalo, New York plant after the workers sent an email to Elon Musk, the owner, principal owner of Tesla, notifying him that they were going to start unionizing or a campaign to create a union for the company. So he just went and fired them all. Meanwhile, over at Starbucks, the interim CEO, Howard Schultz, another billionaire, is basically telling Bernie Sanders and the committee that he is the chairman of in the United States Senate, the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, to go screw themselves. He just said he's not going to do it. He's not going to show up. Bernie says apparently it's easier for Schultz to fire workers who are exercising their constitutional right to form a union than it is to answer questions from elected officials. There's a video about it over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. Welcome back. 51 minutes past the hour. Jim in Chicago. Hey, Jim, what's up?
Hey, Tom. How's it going?
Good.
I couldn't agree with you more than Sheldon Whitehouse needs to be AG.
Yeah.
Biden needs to step it up and, take charge. And then secondly, I am a resident in Chicago, Illinois. Tried calling Dick Durbin all day yesterday.
Your senator.
I've tried my senator. Tried 3 times this morning and nothing. Can't even leave a message.
Wow. I called all 5 of his offices, or maybe all 6 of them. I don't recall. And in two of the offices, I think, Rock Island maybe, but in 2 of his offices, there was a leave a message at the tone. So you might want to try calling some of the regional offices. They're all listed on his website at durbin.senate.gov.
Yeah, I tried Rock Island as well, and it just hung up on me.
Huh, so. Interesting. Well, maybe they're being inundated. I don't think that my show or my newsletter have enough of a reach to shut down a senator's office, but who knows? I don't know. Hopefully he's paying attention.
I have an Illinois area code.
Yeah, so they should recognize they should answer your call. You'd think, I figured they weren't answering my call because I've got an Oregon area code, But
I'm very disappointed.
Yeah.
Very disappointed.
yeah, well, he can change. Jim, thanks for the call. Thanks for the update. Pearson in Lamarck, Texas. Hey, Pearson, what's on your mind today?
Good morning or good afternoon. I'm not sure which it is still. I haven't looked at the clock yet.
It's morning over here.
Yeah, still alive. That's what matters.
There you go.
No matter what time. Got some good news with regards to Dick Durbin's phone number. Along the list, I maintain a list of U.S. senators and U.S. representatives I call. I have both their Washington, D.C. numbers as well as their various field lines like you have. Mm-hmm. And Dick Durbin is one of those Democrats like Joe Manchin who I've had to file complaints on in the past for the way they operate their voicemail. And after you complain and they fix it for a while, then they go back to what they're doing. But his Rock Island phone number is operating right now. It's taking voicemail machine recordings.
Interesting.
At 309 area code 786-5173. 786-5173.
Yeah, and you can look it up.
It's
It's listed on his website at durbin.senate.gov, and then you hit the contact Senator Durbin, and it shows you. Yeah.
But I thought I'd help expedite democracy.
Well, good on you, Pearson. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. Mark in Las Vegas. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind?
Well, hi, Tom. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, regarding Jim Jordan, who I mistakenly, but maybe rightfully called similar to Jim Jones. I mean, they are cultists in the end. He gets the idea that New York City is really dangerous because, in a way, I blame our media because they hype up anecdotal reports and ignore the statistics. You can talk about statistics, and people tend to turn off. So I want to have the media held responsible for their poor reporting that leads to people's ignorant stances. What do you think?
I think that's a reasonable concern, Mark, and don't disagree with you. So I think so. Thank you for weighing in with that. Jerry in Saginaw, Michigan. Hey, Jerry, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Tom.
Hey,
how's the weather in Portland?
It's raining.
Oh,
it'll stop in June.
A comment, if I may, and a question. The comment is people who are wondering about civil war. We are in one right now. The wealthy against the non-wealthy, and the wealthy have all the guns.
Well, it's been that way for a long time.
I wanted to call a spade, that we are in a civil war. Okay. My question, what recourse or methods can taxpayers use to impeach those fascist justices or judges in general? Do we have any way of getting rid of them?
Justices of the Supreme Court can only be impeached through the same process that was used against Donald Trump. And bill of impeachment has to originate in the House of Representatives. It has to pass the House of Representatives. It goes to the Senate, where 2/3 of the Senate have to approve it. And so it's extremely unlikely that any of these guys are going to be impeached. But I do believe that if the Justice Department and Democrats in the Senate, and Dick Durbin as chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee should be leading this charge, were to start subpoenaing Ginny Thomas and demanding that she come in and speak under oath, and particularly the Justice Department looking into this, just like John Mitchell did when he was the head of the Justice Department under Richard Nixon, and he went after Abe Fortas, who was a sitting member of the U.S. Supreme Court. He went after Abe Fortas's wife, and that provoked Abe Fortas to resign from the Supreme Court because he didn't want to see his wife dragged through the mud. And Ginny Thomas has been up to no good for so long in so many ways, and up to her eyeballs in large quantities of cash around her being up to no good, that I think that there's lots and lots and lots of grist for that particular mill. Jerry, thank you for the call. I'm sorry there's not a way that you and I as individual citizens can do anything other than speak to our members of the United States Senate, which could be holding hearings right now on Clarence Thomas, but is choosing not to, so far.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Corporate bosses. In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Meat Racket, The Secret Takeover of America's Food Business by Christopher Leonard. This is from the prologue. It's titled The Hidden King. Nobody ever visits the stranded little community of Waldron, Arkansas. But even if they did, a tourist would never see the place for what it really is. Most outsiders would be fooled into thinking it was an actual small town. On any given morning, the residents awaken and begin their routine along Main Street. Old men park their pickup trucks by the curb in front of the Rock Cafe, which opens early for breakfast. As the cafe's booths and tables fill up, a congregation of old-timers in cowboy hats gathers in a loose ring of aluminum chairs out front, smoking and talking and stubbing out their cigarette butts in a bucket full of sand. Later in the morning, Chambers Bank in the south end of town opens up, and the tellers cheerfully greet customers by name. On Thursday at noon, the livestock auction opens in a cavernous barn on the north side of town, drawing crowds of ranchers who haul steel trailers behind their trucks, with cows staring out between the horizontal slats. In the late afternoon, teenagers park their cars by the gazebo south of the auction barn, proudly displaying their Mustangs and Broncos like big game trophies. These events have a rhythm of their own, the clockwork functioning of a small-town economy. But it's all just window dressing. All of it would cease to exist in a moment and have no impact whatsoever on the true Waldron or its true economic reason for being. The real tempo of the town's economic pulse is measured by the coming and going of semi-trucks that roll down Main Street at periodic intervals, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In the middle of the night, tanker trucks full of animal feed rumble past the empty stores and out onto country roads that lead into the hilly terrain that surrounds town. At dawn, other trucks trundle in from the hills, heaped high with battered metal crates full of chickens that exude clouds of white feathers along the highway. The tempo can be measured in the regular arrival of train cars full of grain and oil seeds that dump their loads at a feed mill that clanks and hums and churns all night. And in the parade of refrigerated trucks that pull up to a slaughterhouse near the feed mill and get loaded with pallets of frozen meat. This is the real functioning of Waldron, Arkansas, and its true reason for being. This is the heartbeat of Tyson Foods, the nation's biggest meat company. The Tyson plant on the north end of Waldron is the only thing that keeps the town on the map. Appropriately, many residents simply refer to it as the complex. That's because the Tyson plant isn't just a factory, it's more like an entire small-town economy consolidated into one property. The complex contains its own feed mill and hatchery, its own trucking line and slaughterhouse that covers several acres of land and processes about 1 million dead chickens a week. The complex is like an economic dark star that has drawn into itself all the independent businesses an economic dark star that has drawn into itself all the independent businesses that used to define a small town like Waldron, the kinds of businesses that were once the economic pillars of rural America. Of course, tourists to Waldron would never see the Tyson plant, and not just because it sits on the north fringe of town away from Main Street. Visitors are stopped at its front gate and forbidden from exploring its grounds. So a tourist would have to be content to stroll along the sidewalks downtown, observing the fake Main Street, the deceptive array of little businesses that make it seem like a community. This illusory appearance cloaks Tyson's existence all the way from its roots in rural America to the grocery store shelves and restaurant menus where its products finally reach American consumers. The average shopper is usually fooled when he or she peruses the meat aisle, seeing what appears to be an abundance of choices and products. Tyson brand name wouldn't necessarily stand out with its logo gracing just a handful of products. But the rotisserie chicken slowly turning in its oven, the Bonisi brand pepperoni, the Lady Astor brand chicken cordon bleu, the frozen chicken pot pie, and the Wright brand bacon all come from the same company, Tyson. And then there is all the unlabeled meat that Tyson floods into the U.S. food system every day. The meat served in cafeterias, nursing homes, fast food restaurants, and suburban eateries where more and more Americans eat their meals. There's a very good chance any of the meat purchased in these places was made by Tyson. Even if Tyson did not produce a given piece of meat, the consumer is really only picking between different versions of the same commodified beef, chicken, and pork that is produced throughout a system that Tyson pioneered. Between the remote farms and towns like Waldron, where Tyson raises millions of animals, and the final point of contact where consumers buy the company's meat. Unseen between these two poles is a hidden power structure that has quietly reshaped U.S. rural economies while gaining unprecedented control over the nation's meat supply. Just a handful of companies produce nearly all the meat consumed in the United States, and Tyson is the king among them. The company sits atop a powerful oligarchy of corporations that determines how animals are raised, how much farmers get paid, and how meat is processed, all while reaping massive profits and remaining almost entirely opaque to the consumer. Because Tyson and its imitators are based in the geographic and economic fringes of America in forgotten places like Waldron, the company has managed to escape the scrutiny it deserves. While Tyson's operations are remote, the company's business practices affect virtually everyone. About 95% of Americans eat chicken, which means they almost certainly eat chicken produced by Tyson. And then it goes on from there. The book is The Meat Racket, The Secret Takeover of America's Food Industry by Christopher Leonard. Of the immemorial imagination, but my professional focus has always been on consciousness and energy. Healing Power of Neurofeedback by Steve Larson.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the second hour of our program. How Republicans just lost Generation Z. This, one of the biggest bright moments of my days and my life these days is watching these young people, young people in their teens and 20s who are coming up in the world and are just saying, we're not going to take it anymore. We are sick and tired of being shot at school. We are sick and tired of the minimum wage being at $7.25 an hour. We are sick and tired of not being able to join a union when we get a job at Amazon or Starbucks. We're sick and tired of not having health care. We're sick and tired of going into debt to the tune of, enough to just lock out life opportunities just to get a damn education. Generation Z is awake, and they are having none of this Republican stuff that we kind of seem to put up with for most of my life. I mean, there was a lot of pushback to it prior to the Reagan Revolution, but we've had 40 years now of basically Republican policies, even being enforced by a couple of Democratic presidents. I mean, Bill Clinton and Barack Obama both did a lot of good things, but they also continued many Republican policies, many of these neoliberal policies. And these young people, the Generation Z, they're not having it. They know what neoliberalism is. They know how what a failure it's been. They totally get it. I mean, after the shooting in Nashville last month, you had all these young people show up. I mean, it was all ages and all races and genders and everything else, showed up at the Capitol building there, but there were a lot of young people, in part because 2 of the 3 legislators who were being expelled by Republicans were young people themselves. They were Zoomers also. Representatives Justin Jones and Justin Pearson. And now, Republicans, now there's another shooting here now. This is, in Louisville in a bank. Last week, Ted Cruz had made an offhand comment apparently about how, well, yeah, if we had more guns and people were in banks with guns, things would be safer. Right, so a guy buys a gun, walks into a bank in Louisville, kills 5 people. One of the police officer was shot in the head, is still in critical condition. Brilliant, Ted. Representative Jones of Tennessee, Justin Jones, said, your overreaction to his Republican colleagues, your overreaction, your flexing of false power has awakened a generation of people who will let you know that your time is up. And you could just see these old white Republicans in the Tennessee legislature sitting around going, yeah, right. They don't realize their time is up. There is a new generation coming up, and they are wide awake. They know what's going on. These young people are not buying the BS that's coming out of Fox so-called news, right-wing hate radio, and all this stuff. In fact, just consider some of these statistics. These are 18 to 29-year-olds, right, which is Zoomers. 63% of them think that gun laws should be stricter. 70% of 18 to 29-year-olds voted for John Fetterman in Pennsylvania when they went back and looked at that election. In fact, across the nation in the 2022 election, of the Gen Z voters who actually showed up to vote, and they're starting to show up to vote in substantial numbers, 77% of them nationwide voted for Democrats for Congress. I don't think we've ever seen numbers like that on a generational basis. I may be wrong. I don't have the statistics for every generation, for every, past, 50, 60, 70 years. But I don't, I've been doing this a long time, and I don't recall anybody, ever seeing a number like that. 77%, 87% of the students in Wisconsin who voted in the race for Supreme Court justice, 87% of them voted for the candidate most closely aligned with the Democratic Party, Janet Prestowitz, however you say her last name, Judge Janet. And now that, the leading cause of death for children in America is bullets, I don't think Gen Z is going to vote for a Republican for a long, long time. I remember the early 1970s, after Richard Nixon went down in flames, and everybody saw how incredibly corrupt the Republican Party was, and said, there were, Kevin Phillips, I believe, wrote a book about it. This is the end of the Republican Party. I mean, there were people thinking the Republican Party was just never going to hold power again. And then Jude Wanniski came along in 1977 with his 2 Santa Claus theory. And that just the sun opened up. Oh, yeah, when Republicans get the White House, and, Reagan was the next one to do that, spend money like a drunken sailor, and then as soon as a Democrat comes in, and give huge tax cuts to the very, very rich, and then as soon as the Democrat comes in, starts screaming about the deficit caused by your tax cuts for rich people. They've been doing it ever since. They're still doing it. And now, to really, put the screws to Generation Z, to Zoomers, you've got Republicans saying, hey, let's raise their Social Security retirement age, but don't worry for you older people right now who vote Republican. We're not going to do it to you. We're going to do it to these young. That's going to endear them to the GOP, right? Remember in 2005, after George W. Bush got reelected, and he gave that speech where he talked about how I earned a bunch of political capital in this election, and I intend to spend it to privatize Social Security. And he went on it was going to be an over 20-city tour to promote the idea of converting Social Security into individual private retirement accounts administered by Wall Street banks. And after 5-6 cities, every time he spoke someplace, the idea of privatizing Social Security became less popular, and finally he gave up. He said, okay, that's it, screw that. And he started painting or something. I don't know what he did, but we just went back to torturing people in Iraq and Afghanistan. But this is what they want to do. This is what Reagan did. See, I mean, somehow these guys think that Reagan's playbook will still work. In 1983, Ronald Reagan wanted to begin the privatization of Social Security. And so he did a couple of things. Number one, he made Social Security income taxable. Used to be you didn't pay income taxes on Social Security income. Now you do. You could thank Ronald Reagan for that. Number two, he significantly increased the amount of tax that you pay into the Social Security Trust Fund, but not for rich people. They put a cap on this, on the amount of money. Now, the cap goes all the way back to the origin of Social Security in 1935, but they capped it out in 1983 at, my recollection is it was around $40,000 back then. And, it's risen up to, it's around $150,000 right now. But if you make more than $150,000 a year, and there's a lot of people in America who do, you don't pay a single penny on the additional income in taxes to support Social Security. Reagan could have fixed that. In fact, if he had done away with the cap, Social Security would be solvent forever. But Reagan wasn't interested in making Social Security solvent forever. He was interested in starting the process of privatizing it. That's why they rolled out 401ks back then. It was like, hey, let's get people used to this, and we'll subsidize it with a tax break. Is Gen Z going to go along with raising the retirement age like Reagan did? Because in 83, Reagan raised the retirement age to 67, but he didn't have it kick in until last year or the year before. I mean, he put like 40 years of space between himself and that increase in the retirement age because he knew the consequences would not make him popular. And today, when they talk about, well, the retirement age for Social Security just went up to 67, nobody says because Ronald Reagan did it. So that's what Republicans now are trying to do. They want to take it up to 70. While in France, people are in the streets because Macron raised it from 62 to 64. Here, the Republicans want to raise it from 67 to 70. But it'll only kick in for those people who are in their 20s right now, don't you know? Right. You think Gen Z is ever going to vote Republican? They'd have to be nuts. I'm telling you, we are looking at the fourth turning here. We are looking at the end of a generational cycle, a 40-year generational cycle within these 80-year larger cycles. And, what's old is going to be new again. The progressive politics are on a roll.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
I am very optimistic about the future of this country. If we can just make it through the bloodlust of the NRA and the GOP. And welcome back. And let's pick up some of your phone calls here. Stephen in Queens, New York. Hey, Stephen, thanks for watching us on YouTube. What's up?
Hey, Tom, thanks for picking me up. I wanted to talk to you about guns. And things are so totally out of control that it gets a lot of press when there's a big shoot-up. But what people forget about, it gets one-day press when some guy kills his family or some woman kills her husband. Or how about these kids killing each other? Small children find a gun and kills each other. That's bad enough. And, there's lots of moving parts with background checks, red flags, and eliminating this kind of gun or that kind of gun. With all this discussion, there's one thing that I don't hear anybody talking about, and I wish they would, because, it's all about selling guns. It's all about the arms manufacturer.
Yep.
And
making
what
profits.
is not heard about is where do all these Mexican cartels get their guns?
They're getting them from here.
Absolutely. And what about these Haitian gangs?
In fact, we tried to do something about that back during the, I think it was the Clinton administration. Maybe it was the Obama administration. It was that ATF program where they actually were selling guns just to track them down to Mexico.
Was that the thing with Eric Holder? Was that thing?
I think so. Yeah, and I think that was during the Obama administration. And the Republicans went nuts. You know, it was I'm forgetting the code name for the operation. But it became like in Republican circles, it was considered a huge scandal.
In Haiti, it's like total anarchy with the gangs over there.
Oh, yeah.
El Salvador is the same thing. Honduras, they're getting all their stuff from here in the States. And, of course, the Winchester and all the rest of them, they love it. You know, it's more money for them. Yeah. And it's sad, man. It's really pitiful.
It really is.
This is not discussed in the news, and I don't know why. Well, I know why, but I mean, I wish it was. Anyway, that's my rant.
Yeah, well, it's a good rant. Thank you very much for that. Spot on.
And keep it up.
Yeah, I will. Thank you, Stephen. From Stephen to Stephen, this is Stephen in Miami. Hey, Stephen, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Good to talk to you again. I agree 100%. I think it was Stowe and Howe, the authors of The Fourth Turning.
Yeah.
Brilliant book. Anybody listening hasn't read it, I highly suggest it. You'll see everything that Tom talks about in there. And this generation is certainly, I mean, I feel bad for them in a lot of ways because we've really handed them a ball of trash, generally speaking.
Yeah,
but
particularly with
I've been, which is the worst. That's the worst part of it, right? Because that's gonna come when we're all gone.
Yeah,
that's really gonna be when that hits. Unfortunately, for my daughter's included in that. So, I called a couple of months ago. I told you at the time that I've been listening to you now for 20 years, going back to the old, days of the.
Stephen,
Iraq
I just
War.
have 10 seconds left. I'm sorry. Can you get to the point?
Okay. Listen. Yep. I told you at the time that I was considering leaving the country, and I've decided we are leaving.
Really? Where are you
took my
going?
daughter to Australia. Yes, Australia. I took my daughter to Australia for Christmas. We loved it. There's no homeless people. There's no shootings.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
It's a beautiful
lovely,
country.
beautiful country,
and they got wonderful people there.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yep. No, we had an absolutely wonderful time, and we're done. Wow.
Well, I'm going to miss you, Stephen. But I hope you have a wonderful time.
I appreciate it, Tom.
Yeah.
I'll keep listening to you.
Okay, yeah, stay in touch. Thank you. I got to run. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. So you don't think generally of community gardening and cancer and heart disease prevention in the same thought, in the same sentence. But sure enough, this was published in the journal Lancet Planetary Health, a study that was funded by the American Cancer Society, the first ever randomized control trial of the effects of community gardening. And what they did was they started a garden. This was in Denver. It was 291 non-gardening adults, average age 41. And they gave them half of the group. They gave them a garden plot and some seed introductory gardening course. And what they found was by the fall that those people who were doing the gardening had increased their fiber consumption by 1.4 grams a day, 7%, which is substantial. And they believe that this will help them with everything from diabetes to certain cancers. It's absolutely a fascinating study. There's a whole video about it over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. "22 minutes past the hour." The headline in the Washington Post today: 2 friends were denied care after Florida banned abortion. 1 almost died. And I don't normally read, particularly from other people's writings, but I just have to share this story with you. This is by Carolyn Kitchener in the Washington Post, and you can read it on their website, WashingtonPost.com. And it's about a woman named Anya Cook. And she was, it says, Anya Cook did not want to push, but sitting on the toilet, legs splayed wide, she knew she didn't have a choice. She was about to deliver her baby alone in the bathroom of a hair salon. On this Thursday afternoon in mid-December, about 5 months before her due date, she knew the baby would not be born alive. And, you know, they just talk about this. At 36, she had a long history of miscarriages. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes. As soon as the fetus hit the water, blood started flowing between her thighs. It splattered the white toilet seat across the floor. She panicked. She called her husband, said, come into the bathroom. Over the course of the day, she lost roughly half the blood in her body. Now, this is a woman who had intended to have a pregnancy, had worked to have a pregnancy, wanted to have a pregnancy, but her water broke the night before. And, you know, at that early stage of gestation, 4 months in, when your water breaks, it's almost impossible for a fetus to survive that. I mean, that amniotic fluid is necessary. And normally what happens is when that happens, you go to the hospital and they do an abortion, basically. They terminate the pregnancy because the fetus is not viable. She went to the emergency room when her water broke, and they said, sorry, we can't do what we normally do. What is the standard of care? What she has is what's called pre-viability PPROM, which stands for preterm pre-labor rupture of the membranes. Pre-viability pre-labor rupture of membranes. It happens in about 1% of pregnancies. And, you know, it's terminal for the fetus. And so you go into the hospital and they take everything out, and that's you know, or they take out the fetus, they perform an abortion, and that's the end of that. But she went to the hospital and they said, sorry, because of the laws here in Florida, we're afraid to give you that abortion, so you're just going to have to go home. And when you're close to death, give us a call. And ended up sitting on the toilet and, you know, having this dead fetus come out of her and then losing half the blood in her body. By the time she got to the hospital, she was on a ventilator. She was unconscious. They were breathing for her because Ron DeSantis signed this law. 18 states now have banned abortion before fetal viability. And in all of those states, this is how it can play out. And by the way, this is, you know, the really surprising part of this is that a 2022 study in the impact of Texas's 6-week abortion ban found 57% of pre-viability PPROM patients in Texas were not given the option to end their pregnancies. But the condition is so common, I'm quoting from the Washington Post, the condition is common enough that one day after Cook was turned away from the hospital, the same thing happened to one of her closest friends. Shanae Smith Cunningham, 32, was 19 weeks into her pregnancy when her water broke. The exact same thing happened. And this almost kills these women. And in many cases leaves them permanently scarred, you know, permanently infertile. When Hani Mostafa was the obgyn who was on duty that day, he says, quote, she was critically ill and mechanically ventilated. He stepped out into the waiting room to talk to Derek, her husband, and said, your wife could die. I will do my very best, but the rest is up to God. Thanks to Ron DeSantis signing this ban on abortion in Florida. This is what's happening in America right now. And the Republican Party thinks they're going to get reelected on this stuff? Seriously? Stay tuned. I got to tell you how the Republicans have been busy, and I'll pick up your calls right after the break.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Exposing the con in conservative. Back with your calls in just a few minutes. Book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Ezra Klein's new book, Why We're Polarized. This is from the introduction, and it's a couple pages into it. I'm starting out here. I have found that American politics is best understood by braiding two forms of knowledge that are often left separate: the direct, on-the-ground insights shared by politicians, activists, government officials, and other subjects of my reporting, and the more systemic analyses conducted by political scientists, sociologists, historians, and others with the time, methods, and expertise to study American politics at scale. On their own, political actors often ignore the incentives shaping their decisions, and academic researchers miss the human motivations that drive political decision-making. Together, however, they shine bright light on how and why American politics works the way it does. There's much awry in American politics, and I won't in this book attempt to catalog all of it. But I've come to believe the master story, the one that drives almost all divides and most fundamentally shapes the behavior of participants, is the logic of polarization. That logic, put simply, is this: to appeal to a more polarized public, political institutions and political actors behave in more polarized ways. As political institutions and actors become more polarized, they further polarize the public. This sets off a feedback cycle. To appeal to a yet more polarized public, institutions must polarize further. When faced with yet more polarized institutions, the public polarizes further, and so on. Understanding that we exist in relationship with our political institutions, that they are changed by us and we are changed by them, is the key to this story. We don't just use politics for our own ends. Politics uses us for its own ends. There are many different types of polarization possible, and I'll discuss some of them later in the book, but the locus of polarization I'll discuss is on political identity. And that requires saying a few words about a term that should be very useful in American politics, but that has become almost useless: identity politics. A core argument of this book is that everyone engaged in American politics is engaged in identity politics. This is not an insult, and it's not controversial. We form and fold identities constantly, naturally. Identity is present in politics in the way gravity, evolution, or cognition is present in politics. That is to say, it is omnipresent in politics because it is omnipresent in us. There is no way to read the literature on how humans form and protect their personal and group identities, literature I will survey in this book, and believe that any of us is immune. It runs so deep in our psyches, so activated so easily by even weak cues and distant threats, that it is impossible to speak seriously about how we engage with one another without discussing how our identities shape that engagement. Unfortunately, the term identity politics has been weaponized. It is most often used by speakers to describe politics as practiced by members of historically marginalized groups. If you're black and you're worried about police brutality, that's identity politics. If you're a woman and you're worried about the male-female pay gap, that's identity politics. But if you're a rural gun owner decrying universal background checks as tyranny, or a billionaire CEO complaining that high tax rates demonize success, or a Christian insisting on nativity scenes in public squares, well, that's just good old-fashioned politics. With a quick sleight of hand, identity becomes something that only marginalized groups have. The term identity politics in this usage obscures rather than illuminates. It's used to diminish and discredit the concerns of weaker groups by making them look self-interested. Special pleading in order to clear the agenda for the concerns of stronger groups, which are framed as more rational, proper topics for normal political debate. But in wielding identity as a blade, we have lost it as a lens, blinding ourselves in a bid for political advantage. We're left searching in vain for what we refuse to allow ourselves to see. All politics is influenced by identity. Those identities are most powerful when they are so pervasive as to be either invisible or uncontroversial. American is an identity. So too is Christian. When politicians, including the irreligious, end speeches with "God bless America," it's not because they're making an appeal to a higher power, but because they're making an appeal to our bedrock identities. If you don't believe me, ask yourself why there are so few open atheists or even agnostics in national politics. This does not mean that politics is an equation solved by locating identity. Identity shapes our worldview, but it does not mechanistically decide it. And while we often speak of identity as a singular, It is always a dizzying plural. We have countless identities, some of them in active conflict with each other, others lying dormant until activated by threat or fortune. Much that happens in political campaigns is best understood as a struggle over which identities voters will inhabit come election day. Will they feel like workers exploited by their bosses, or heartlanders dismissed by coastal elites? Will they vote as patriotic traditionalists offended by NFL players who kneel during the national anthem, or as parents worried about the climate their children will inhabit? What we are often fighting over in American politics is group identity and status. Fights that express themselves in debates over policy and power, but cannot be truly reconciled by either. Health policy is positive sum, but identity conflict is zero sum. The book Why We're Polarized by Ezra Klein.
Want to know what's coming up on the next program? Want to know what I talked about in the last program? It's all over at Tom.tv. That's THOM.tv, Tom.tv. You know, James Baldwin was one of the greatest writers of the 20th century, of any type, and his insights into black cops and police in general are just brilliant. This is one of his writings about black policemen. He said, "Black policemen were another matter. We used to say, if you must call a policeman, for God's sake, make sure it's a white one." And we hardly ever did call a policeman. A black policeman could completely demolish you. He knew far more about you than a white policeman could, and you were without defenses before this black brother in uniform, whose entire reason for breathing seemed to be his hope to offer proof that, though he was black, he was not black like you. Baldwin goes on to talk about, you know, black cops and his father and his relationship with his father and just the general violence perpetrated against black people. There's a whole video about it over at thomhartmann.com. You can check it out. Well, the Republicans have been busy, goes the meme that is floating around the internet right now. I just thought I'd share it with you real quickly because it goes back to this question I've been asking. This month is the 20th anniversary of this program. We've been doing this program for over 20 years now, for 20 years now. And during that entire period of time, I've been running this contest, you know, tell me anything that the Republicans have done in the last, well, you know, basically since the Reagan Revolution. I'm assuming that there have to be things Republicans did back under the Eisenhower administration, but maybe we could even start with Nixon. I don't know. But anything that Republicans have done that originated as a Republican idea, that Republicans put into law, that Republican presidents signed into law, that Republicans support, that benefits average people instead of billionaires or corporations. And, you know, there's been a couple of people who've kind of won with little weird things around the edges. But basically, nah. What has the GOP done for you? I mean, if you make less than $1 million a year, they've done nothing for you. But here's what they've been up to. This, you know, just from this meme. They've been banning books. They've been giving tax cuts to rich people. They've been banning black history. They've been praising Putin. They're complaining that they want a divorce from the country. They banned abortion. They deny climate change. They're attacking drag queens. They're denying health care to trans people. They're arresting women or threatening to arrest women who cross state lines to get an abortion. They're tracking teen menstruation cycles. They're promoting forced births. They're holding sham hearings. They're obsessed with Hunter Biden's genitalia. They voted against mental health support for our schools. They're threatening to default on our debt. They've tried to take away Social Security, and they've half privatized Medicare now. They've taken away tampons for students, and they are prioritizing gun manufacturers over people's lives, particularly students' lives. I mean, what does this say about the GOP? What does this party stand for? Other than just raw fascism, hate,
Anyway, let's pick up your phone calls here. Ida in Knoxville, Georgia. Hey, Ida, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Listen, we elect our officials to protect us. That means our families, our little ones. Then if they can't do something about gun control, can we not sue them if our child gets shot?
No. There's this thing called sovereign immunity. It's a legal doctrine that says that you can't sue a government official for doing their job when you don't like the way that they did their job or the outcome of their job produces a harm. What you have to do, and the theory and the reason for that is that in a democracy, the way that you hold elected officials to account is not by suing them, but by voting them out of office. And that's what we need to be doing, Ida, is we need to, Democrats, for example, did not show up in the last Florida election. You had, 55% of Republicans showed up, 45% of Democrats showed up. Part of that was because Ron DeSantis was parading black people in front of the cameras in chains for having voted. And it depressed the black vote in Florida. Same thing in Georgia, same thing in Texas. This is the new Republican strategy to suppress the vote. We've got to stand up to this. We've got to organize. We've got to get our people voting. That's the bottom line. That's the only option we have, Ida.
No, we can't really blame the people that sells the guns in these here stores because there's more guns out on the streets and in these alleys. I have a neighbor over here that works up north. When he comes home, he goes out into his field and I know he's got AKs because he sits there and just shoots them. And our law official don't do nothing.
Yeah. Well, I can't speak to that.
The only thing we can do is stay in the house.
Yeah, I get it. And people should not have to feel afraid that their neighbors, stray bullets from their neighbors are going to get them any more than children in school should not feel afraid. Ida, thank you for the call. It's nice to meet you. Nice to hear from you. Colleen in Nashville, Tennessee. Am I saying your name right?
Yes, sir, but I'm out of Nashville. But I just wanted to say, with all due respect, I'm going to try to talk fast. In the late 60s and the 70s, we protested to stop a war. Women had to get together to get equality in the workplace and to even get our birth control pills paid for by insurance companies and abortion choices. We dropped the voting age to 18, which I wasn't. I had one more year. And we actually fought for equality for the blacks and civil rights. And nowadays, sir, I would get in the streets with my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren to protect them in the schools here.
There you go.
And read Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And if they can do it in foreign countries, they can do it in this country. I don't know how you feel about that. But thank you very much, Mr. Hartmann, for giving me the right to speak.
Yeah, Confessions of an Economic Hitman is a brilliant book. Tony Perkins is the author.
It's
right?
been so long since I read it. It could be, sir.
Yeah, I'm having one of those moments, but I'm pretty sure, or something close to that. In any case, I know him, and I've read the book, and he's been on the program, and yes, it is a we have economic hitman here too. John Perkins, that's right. And
I have one other thing
John's
to
a good
say.
guy.
I have one other thing to say, if I can, really quick. Even in the early 70s, when I wanted to have tubal ligation, I had to go to another city because the only hospital in our town was run by Catholics, and they refused to let that happen there.
Yeah.
So, and I'm Catholic myself, but because I'm originally from South Louisiana. But, it's little things like that we forget that we have gotten. Now, that's not to say that the Republicans haven't gotten rid of most of it and are trying to get rid of even more. But I back the young kids doing what they're doing, and I'm proud of them.
Yeah, there you go. Me too. I think Gen Z is going to be the salvation of this country. Colleen, thank you so much for the call. Good talking to you. Susan in Phoenix, Arizona. Hey, Susan, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, well, I heard that you were talking about the arms going over to Mexico. And, you know, I'm in Arizona, so I remember that. It was, they called it Fast and Furious.
Yep, that's right.
During the Obama administration. And I think it was, I was just looking it up, and this Yahoo ads article says that they called it Medrano and Hernandez operations under the Bush administration and continued it into the Obama administration, and I believe Obama didn't know about it.
That's correct.
And then
it's all coming back.
And they
Yep.
tried to hang it on him. So
Yep.
that's another thing you can put on your list for the Republicans. And I thought I might add a few more things. If you go back into history, we can credit the Republicans for giving us the war on drugs, privatizing prisons, and legalizing bribery.
Yeah, legalize. Yep, the Supreme Court did that. Nixon did the war on drugs, the privatization of prisons. I don't recall exactly when that happened, but this
Reagan. He started.
It was Reagan. Yeah, okay. It was this classic neoliberalism. By the way, just two kind of news data points. Chuck Schumer, God bless him, has just announced that now that Donald Trump has called for defunding the police, they want, Trump is saying that it's time to defund the FBI, and Jim Jordan is supporting that. He's saying, yes, we need to defund the Justice Department and the FBI. Said that on Fox News. Chuck Schumer's going to put it to a vote. Y'all want to defund the FBI? Republicans? Step up, number one. And number two, the Democratic National Committee, President Biden has just announced that the DNC's annual convention is going to be held this year in Chicago. Instead of, there were a lot of people hoping for Atlanta, but it's going to be in Chicago, which is a great town. And I think that's just spectacular. Susan, I got to run, but thank you for the call. And thanks for reminding me, Fast and Furious. I appreciate that. It's almost 15 minutes before the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls on the other side of this break. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, the place where smart people get their news.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Judy in Buckley, Washington. Hey, Judy, thanks for watching us on Free Speech. What's up?
Hi. Thanks. Hi, Tom. I was listening to your program. You're talking about Generation Z, and you were saying they're going to save us, hopefully. But I'm concerned because what I'm seeing here where I live is, indoctrination might be a strong word, but just walking around Buckley, which is very rural, very Republican, I saw a 6-year-old with a shirt with her family, "Let's go, Brandon."
Oh, geez.
So, yeah. And there was a YouTube video, and it was a little girl crying, and the mom was filming her, and she was crying because her dad called her a Democrat.
Oh, my.
So if the Republicans continue with gerrymandering and voter suppression, the same policies are going to continue unless Generation Z is fully energized.
Yeah, which they will continue this. I mean, these people just never give up, It's like when...
I'm just...
Go ahead.
No, I'm just not very hopeful.
Yeah.
And I live in Washington with 2 Democratic senators.
Yeah.
And I call Murray constantly because she's in the leadership. And I don't know, she's not even paying attention. She could do hearings on abortion, gun violence,
Maria
because
Cantwell.
she's the chair of the, Yeah. Anyway.
Which committee is she the chair of?
Thank you so much. I think it's health, labor, and pensions.
Huh. Interesting. Okay. But
she doesn't do the hearings about health issues.
Yeah. The Democratic senators need to grow a spine. They need to start getting active. I'm with you, Judy. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank
for the
you.
call.
Have a good day.
Yeah,
all right.
You too. Susan in Saratoga Springs, New York. Hey, Susan, what's on your mind today?
Can you hear me? Oh, okay. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Yeah, you were talking about Florida, and I wanted to share. I just got back from Florida. I went there for a short vacation. I'm a caregiver for a 34 18-year-old disabled adult. So I take that week and I go down and stay with a few friends. So I went down on Sunday a week ago, which was, I think, the 2nd, and I had to come back early. It was horrible, the experience I had
Florida?
down there.
What happened?
The misogyny. I mean, I'd go out to dinner by myself because my friends work. I can, do things by myself. And I would be sitting at the bar, and, I mean, one person came up to me and was, like, trying to get me engaged in this. And I'm just sitting there about the Bud Light rainbow bottle controversy.
Right.
And, I mean, I was like, oh, my God, I couldn't believe this was happening.
Yeah.
And the intolerance, the misogyny. I was afraid to go out by myself. And my friends were like, because I wanted to go to bird sanctuaries on the Everglades,
Right.
They're like, don't go by yourself. The crime was endemic.
Wow.
And you're in the airport, and they're over the loudspeaker. They're talking about watching for human traffickers. I was like, wow. And then everyone's wealthy and white in gated communities, and they have everyone who does a service, which they're so pleasant anyway, and I love them, much more pleasant than white people, I must say, are the blacks. So I felt like Gone with the Wind.
Yeah.
Gone with the Wind.
Yeah, well, you were in the Old South.
The blacks serving the whites.
Yeah, you were in the Old South.
Yeah, really. It was not a good experience. I'll never go to Florida again. Not my cup of tea.
I get it. Okay, Susan, thank you for the report, for the travel log. I think. Thank you. We'll be right back. It is 49 minutes past the hour. Help support progressive radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on Pacifica, or one of our many nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting Progressive Talk Radio and tag you're it. Just some amazing stuff going on over on Fox News. Megan Lapp and David Stevenson have been regular guests across Fox News, and they're claiming to be all worried about whales, all these whales that are dying off the east coast of the United States, arguing that these are the result of the windmills that are out there, right? The ocean wind and the work done to install them. Well, it turns out that Lapp works for an organization whose largest donor is Charles Koch. Whose largest donor is the Texas Public Policy Foundation that gets their money from Charles Koch. And Stevenson works for a group whose largest donor, the Caesar Rodney Institute, is the American Fuel and Petrochemical Manufacturers. So if you have friends who are watching Fox News and they're concerned about the whales, you might want to let them know what's going on. There's a whole video about it over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. Minutes past the hour, picking up your calls. Michael in Chehalis, Washington. Hey, Michael, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I'm just incensed. I believe doctors take a Hippocratic oath to turn no one away in time of need. And then you have these gutless doctors across our country that are turning women away who may die from a bad pregnancy. They're so worried about their damn job. They don't even care about the human life. It's driving me to distraction. I don't know what.
Well, it's got to be a tough one, Michael. When
in time
spend,
of war,
you spend a decade of your life becoming a doctor and getting qualified and getting through your residency and your internships and getting a job and everything. You're $200,000 in debt. And then, something happens that puts all of that at risk. You could get thrown out on the street and no longer be able to practice medicine because some Republican passed a law. And, I mean, what do you do? I would not want to be in that situation.
You're a man. You're a man. You're a grown man. You don't turn a woman away in time of need. Good God. What the hell is this country coming to?
Well, they certainly did in that Florida hospital.
I mean, it's come down to the almighty dollar. They're so worried about their income, they don't give a damn about human life.
I think it's larger than that. I don't think it's just that they're worried about their income. I think they are worried about being able to practice medicine, which is, something I think most of them actually love.
Well, that is practicing medicine. When you turn, it isn't practicing medicine when you turn someone away in time of need.
I'm not willing to make the doctors the bad guys in this little drama here, Mike. The bad guys in this drama are Republican politicians. Let's just say right up front.
You can't blame it all on these so-called Republicans or so-called conservatives because they're neither. Well, they're not. They're not
they're making the rules.
They're not Republicans.
I get it, but they're making the rules. Michael, thank you for the call. I don't want to go round on this any longer. Carol in Eureka, Montana. Hey, Carol, what's on your mind today?
Hi. Well, you were just talking about guns a little while ago, and I was wondering if your listeners or yourself had any idea of the problem that is becoming prevalent with air guns.
No. Tell me about it.
Well, a gentleman in our very, very small community who is very well known, rides his bicycle everywhere, the other day was assaulted by 4 teenagers in a pickup truck and shot in the head with an air gun, and it didn't kill him, but it did affect him, as you can imagine. And our
these are like BB guns kind of thing you're talking about, or pellet guns?
Well, I Googled it because I didn't know what it was, and they look just like machine guns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They look like machine guns.
No, I've seen
someone
them,
pulls
I've
up
seen them
next to you
advertised.
and shoots out the window when you're riding on your bicycle. And the police are in our little town we've gone from being cranberry red to crimson red in the last 3 or 4 years. It's pretty disgusting. The police won't even allow this man who got injured to file a report because the sons of these 4 boys, the fathers of these 4 boys are all prominent members of the community.
This is in small town Montana?
Yes, I don't want to mention the name because I just bought a bicycle and now I'm nervous about
I get it. I'm so sorry to hear that.
And yes, but so I thought, this must just be a fluke. No, I Googled it, and this is a kind of a thing. There are all kinds of incidents going on in this country where people are getting shot with air guns, and so it's. I'm just so upset, and I wanted to bring the attention to everybody that this is a real problem, and that it should definitely be prosecuted, and it's pretty bad when they let people get away with it.
Yeah, and
if you don't have a come up.
you could presumably charge somebody with assault. If
this man had to hire his own attorney.
Yeah, well, because the police wouldn't act.
So the story isn't over yet, and I've got my fingers crossed that it's going to turn out well.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was so gobsmacked by this whole thing that I thought I just better call and let
thank you, Carol.
know that this is going on.
It is noted. I appreciate the call. Thank you. Bob in Lincoln City. Hey, Bob, I got about 40 seconds here. It's yours if you want it.
How you doing? I'm Bob, the old sailor from Florida that's now in Lincoln City.
Uh-huh.
And pulled into the local Safeway Monday morning. I was listening to the shooting information from Louisville, and in front of me is a car that's plastered with right-wing stuff. 4 flags flying, Trump 2024, and one of the stickers said, "Guns save lives." And as I'm listening to what happened in Louisville, I'm reading this sticker and I'm thinking, I would really like for this guy to explain it to me. But as he got in his car, I didn't approach him because
he's
he
nuts.
also had NRA stickers.
Right, because he's friggin' nuts. Bob, thanks for the story. Oh man, the stuff that we have to encounter in these days and ages. Hey, thanks. We'll be right back. Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Ezra Klein's new book, Why We're Polarized. This is from the introduction, and it's a couple pages into it. I'm starting out here. I have found that American politics is best understood by braiding two forms of knowledge that are often left separate: the direct, on-the-ground insights shared by politicians, activists, government officials, and other subjects of my reporting, and the more systemic analyses conducted by political scientists, sociologists, historians, and others with the time, methods, and expertise to study American politics at scale. On their own, political actors often ignore the incentives shaping their decisions, and academic researchers miss the human motivations that drive political decision-making. Together, however, they shine bright light on how and why American politics works the way it does. There's much awry in American politics, and I won't in this book attempt to catalog all of it. But I've come to believe the master story, the one that drives almost all divides and most fundamentally shapes the behavior of participants, is the logic of polarization. That logic, put simply, is this: to appeal to a more polarized public, political institutions and political actors behave in more polarized ways. As political institutions and actors become more polarized, they further polarize the public. This sets off a feedback cycle. To appeal to a yet more polarized public, institutions must polarize further. When faced with yet more polarized institutions, the public polarizes further, and so on. Understanding that we exist in relationship with our political institutions, that they are changed by us and we are changed by them, is the key to this story. We don't just use politics for our own ends. Politics uses us for its own ends. There are many different types of polarization possible, and I'll discuss some of them later in the book, but the locus of polarization I'll discuss is on political identity. And that requires saying a few words about a term that should be very useful in American politics, but that has become almost useless: identity politics. A core argument of this book is that everyone engaged in American politics is engaged in identity politics. This is not an insult, and it's not controversial. We form and fold identities constantly, naturally. Identity is present in politics in the way gravitation is present in politics. That is to say, it is omnipresent in politics because it is omnipresent in us. There is no way to read the literature on how humans form and protect their personal and group identities, literature I will survey in this book, and believe that any of us is immune. It runs so deep in our psyches, so activated so easily by even weak cues and distant threats, that it is impossible to speak seriously about how we engage with one another without discussing how our identities shape that engagement. Unfortunately, the term identity politics has been weaponized. It is most often used by speakers to describe politics as practiced by members of historically marginalized groups. If you're black and you're worried about police brutality, that's identity politics. If you're a woman and you're worried about the male-female pay gap, that's identity politics. But if you're a rural gun owner decrying universal background checks as tyranny, or a billionaire CEO complaining that high tax rates demonize success, or a Christian insisting on nativity scenes in public squares, well, that's just good old-fashioned politics. With a quick sleight of hand, identity becomes something that only marginalized groups have. The term identity politics in this usage obscures rather than illuminates. It's used to diminish and discredit the concerns of weaker groups by making them look self-interested. Special pleading in order to clear the agenda for the concerns of stronger groups, which are framed as more rational, proper topics for normal political debate. But in wielding identity as a blade, we have lost it as a lens, blinding ourselves in a bid for political advantage. We're left searching in vain for what we refuse to allow ourselves to see. All politics is influenced by identity. Those identities are most powerful when they are so pervasive as to be either invisible or uncontroversial. American is an identity. So too is Christian. When politicians, including the irreligious, end speeches with "God bless America," it's not because they're making an appeal to a higher power, but because they're making an appeal to our bedrock identities. If you don't believe me, ask yourself why there are so few open atheists or even agnostics in national politics. This does not mean that politics is an equation solved by locating identity. Identity shapes our worldview, but it does not mechanistically decide it. And while we often speak of identity as a singular, it is always a dizzying plural. We have countless identities, some of them in active conflict with each other, others lying dormant until activated by or fortune. Much that happens in political campaigns is best understood as a struggle over which identities voters will inhabit come election day. Will they feel like workers exploited by their bosses, or heartlanders dismissed by coastal elites? Will they vote as patriotic traditionalists offended by NFL players who kneel during the national anthem, or as parents worried about the climate their children will inhabit? What we are often fighting over in American politics is group identity and status, fights that express themselves in debates over policy and power, but cannot be truly reconciled by either. Health policy is positive sum, but identity conflict is zero sum. The book Why We're Polarized by Ezra Klein.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the third hour of our program. On the line with us is Dr. Gabor Mate, a physician specializing in addiction and trauma, public speaker, the author of 5 books. In fact, we spoke with him about In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, one of his most recent books. His new one is called The Myth of Normal, and this is a fascinating work. His website, Dr. Gabor Mate, drgabormate.com, and drgabormate on Twitter as well. Dr. Mate, welcome back to the program. It's been a while since we've spoken, and it's great to have you with us. Why the myth of normal?
Well, I have to say, first of all, thank you for having me, Tom. And the name is Gabor. Forget the Dr. Mate bit. You were a bit modest in not mentioning the subtitle of my book, which is Trauma, Illness, and Healing in a Toxic Culture. And when I say you were a bit modest, is I actually stole the subtitle from you, in the sense that in your book, The Last Hours of Ancient Sunshine, I think, or something like that was the call, you talked about a culture can be either toxic or nourishing, murderous or nurturing. And I lifted that toxic culture directly from you, so thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'm honored.
But why the myth of normal? It's precisely because what this culture takes to be normal and is actually unhealthy and unnatural and is toxic, to use your phrase. As a physician, I'm trained to look at the normal range within which life is possible, normal range of blood pressure, normal range of blood chemistry, blood acidity, temperature, and so on. And so what is normal is identified with healthy and natural. But we make the mistake of assuming that what is norm in our society is also healthy and natural. In fact, I'm saying that what is normal in our society in terms of how we treat each other, the way we think about human nature, the way we raise kids, the way we work, the way we relate to each other or to the earth in general is actually toxic and unhealthy. So normality in that sense is a myth. And the other myth is that there's those of us that are healthy and those that are not. In fact, health is on a spectrum, and whether we're looking at mental health conditions or physical health conditions, there's a wide spectrum. And to try and separate the abnormal ones from the normal ones is a very polarizing exercise. Talk about polarization. Mm-hmm. Furthermore, the illnesses that people develop of mind and body are very often highly normal responses to abnormal circumstances.
That's a really important point. That our bodies and minds are constantly trying to establish homeostasis, for lack of a better word. Some sort of normal midline, a comfortable place to live and be. And in a bizarre situation or circumstance or world, that can look very unusual. Am I making sense here?
Absolutely. So to give an example that you and I are both interested in, we may not agree, but I'll just give you my point of view on it. Take a condition like ADHD, where the difficulty paying attention, the automatic tuning out. Now, this is often said to be a genetic disease. And I know you and I, although we might have different views on it, we see it neither as, we certainly don't see it as a disease.
Right.
And what I say that the tuning out, the absent-mindedness, is actually a coping mechanism of a young child living in conditions of stress. And so that when a child is stressed and they can't change the situation or to leave it, the mind will tune out as a way of self-protection. So it's a normal adaptation. Mm-hmm. And if you look at why are more and more kids being diagnosed with this condition, partly is due to the fact that the parenting environment, through no fault of individual parents, but owing to the extreme stress in society, has become so difficult and so stressed that more kids are responding by tuning out. So rather than seeking the pathology in the child, we have to look at what is it in the environment, what is abnormal in the environment that the tuning out is a normal response to.
Right.
And I say that it's stress.
Yeah, or in the school system, for that matter. I mean, if we're talking about kids, what is it about the schools that is producing these kinds of behaviors that are defined as pathology? The critique of culture, I think, is a really important one, and I'd like you to speak a little more about that. We have roughly 10% of the American population is on some sort of psychoactive drug right now, according to some reports. I don't know that there's any reliable numbers out there. If there are, you probably know them better than me, and feel free to correct me. But a lot of people are on these drugs, and the family of drugs that particularly concerns me are the SSRIs because they're so terribly addictive. I've had several friends now try to withdraw from SSRI drugs and talk about experiencing electric shocks in their brains and just frantic emotional states that are way beyond where they were when they first went on these drugs. And we've talked with Peter Breggin, who I realize is quite controversial, a number of times about the percentage of school shooters who are on SSRI drugs. I realize that for some people these drugs save their lives, but that said, it seems like there's just really, really widespread use of psychoactive prescription drugs in the United States. Obviously we've got tobacco and alcohol and coffee, which are psychoactive drugs also, but I'm trying to separate out the pharmaceuticals. What are your thoughts on all that?
Well, first of all, I think the figures are higher than 10%. Certainly amongst women, 25% of women are on some psychiatric medication.
Whoa.
And we can talk about why women rather than men. That's an interesting cultural conversation in itself. Maybe we'll get to it. But it's a very high percentage. And as you and I both know, more and more kids are being medicated. I mean, millions of kids are being medicated. And some kids are being medicated with antipsychotic drugs.
Yeah.
Not for psychoses, but just to control their behaviors. And what we have here is a massive social experiment in the chemical control of children's brains. When I say experiment, because nobody had done studies on what the long-term effects are.
Right.
What we do know is that in adults, long-term antipsychotic cause negative brain changes. But let's assume that the same thing is happening to developing brains of our children. That's a massive experiment in messing with children's brains. Now, the SSRIs. When you said that your friends were addicted, I will rephrase that slightly. They were not addicted, they were dependent. It's not the same. Addiction, in my definition, is manifested in any behavior that a person craves and experiences pleasure or relief from in the short term, not give up. So that's what an addiction is. A dependence is somewhat different. A dependence is something when you withdraw from it, you get withdrawal effects. What your friends are experiencing is not sort of a craving and a pleasure and a desire for it. What they're experiencing is the chemical withdrawal. So they're quite right, and you're quite right in describing their experience. They can be quite horrendous coming off the SSRI drugs, but it's not the same. Not quite the same as an addiction.
Right.
So addictions often have dependence as an aspect, but not all dependence is an addiction. Do you see what I mean?
I do. But
Okay, now come back to the SSRIs. I've taken them myself, and they helped me. As a matter of fact, I took them in my 40s, and I didn't know how depressed I had been until I was no longer depressed. After only a few days. And I said to my sister-in-law, "You mean people can feel like this normally?" I had no idea. There was a book in the 60s published, I've been down so long, it feels like up to me. And that's what my depression had been for me. I was so used to it. I thought, this is normal.
Right.
So, yes, as you suggested, these medications can be helpful. But there's a huge but here. Number one, the assumption that people are depressed because they don't have enough serotonin in their brain, so let's give them a medication to elevate serotonin levels, is completely false. Now, if you went to the example is sort of a trivial one, maybe a banal one, but if you went to a party and you were feeling kind of shy, but you had, and so you're sitting in a corner by yourself, and then you had a shot of bourbon, and then you became sociable and voluble and articulate and confident, would that prove that your social shyness was caused by a lack of bourbon in your brain?
Right.
Well, in the same way, we can't assume that giving somebody an SSRI corrects a problem that's due to a lack of serotonin, which is supposed to be the cause of depression. There's no proof for that theory whatsoever. Zero. As a physician, I used to tell my patients, "Oh, you're lacking serotonin. Let's give you some." No proof for it whatsoever. I just bought the Kool-Aid. Now I've looked at the research, and other people have looked at it. There's no such evidence. So the fact that something can work sometimes doesn't prove that you've explained the cause. Now, if you actually look at depression, what does the word mean? What does it mean to depress something? It means to push it down. What gets pushed down in depression? Emotions, feelings. So you have what's called a flat affect. Everything is pushed down. Why would people push down their emotions? You've never met a one-day-old baby that pushes down their emotions.
Right.
The pushing down of emotions is another adaptive dynamic when in your family of origin, the child's natural tendency to experience and express all their emotions is discouraged or even punished, the child will push down their emotions in order to fit in with the environment. And that's where depression starts. Wow. It's in early trauma where you have to push down your emotions in order to be accepted. And let's take a worst case scenario, which is not all that infrequent. A child that suffers abuse of some kind, such as physical punishment or sexual abuse or emotional assault, what's their natural tendency? Is to be angry and to fight back. Can they afford to do that? That would leave them into more trouble. So the brain's defensive mechanism is they pushed on the anger. And that's what's pushed on more often in depression. So therefore, to give somebody an SSRI,
it's like dealing with symptoms rather than cause. In other words, I'm sorry we're out of time. We've hit a break that I can't stop here. But you can read all about it in the book, The Myth of Normal: Trauma, Illness, and Healing in a Toxic Culture by Dr. Gabor Mate. Gabor, thank you so much for dropping by.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. And welcome back. Rose in Lorain, Ohio. Hey, Rose, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Oh, I have to find my mute there. Now I'm on the note speaker. You were talking about the woman who wrote that article or whatever about being sent home after she went to the emergency room.
Right,
for
it's in the Washington Post
problem.
Today. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm an old retired nurse. I'm 82 years old, so I went to nursing school back in the old dark ages of the early 60s.
Back when it was illegal.
Oh, yeah, but whenever anybody came in with a problem like that, before the privatization of Medicare, medical problems, they never would have been sent home. You present yourself in the emergency room with a major problem. And you would have been admitted, and you never would have been sent home to deal with this by yourself. Yeah. You have no training. You have no idea when you're to the point of no return. You have no idea.
Yeah, this woman lost half the blood in her body. I mean, that
I know.
That kills people.
That's criminal.
Yes.
And I don't understand why the AMA is not doing something about this.
Yeah.
Either going towards the legislatures or going towards doing something. This
well,
is
they've issued several sternly worded letters, but that's.
Oh wow! I'm really impressed. I'm impressed.
I know.
Yeah.
But that's what they're up to. It's but Rose, thank you. Thanks for weighing in and sharing your perspective as somebody who's been there and done that. I appreciate it.
Oh, the little nun who lives in the back of my head and has for the past 60 years was having a fit.
Yeah, I get it. Rose, thank you.
I had to say something.
Thank you. I need to move on, but thank you very much. Good talking to you. Corky in Rochester, New York. Hey, Corky, what's on your mind today?
Well, I launched my campaign. I called Congress yesterday. My senator, Congressman, and Patrick Duffy. And I proposed the bill. Get the guns off the street or you don't get the vote.
Yeah.
So, they said they're going to get back to me, and I'm going to keep on it.
Yeah.
They're not going to kill my grandkids or, any other children. This is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
To have these guns out there. Now, the red flag law, that's a good one. Because you can use that red flag law to monitor Facebook and see where somebody is off tilt. You can go to his house with a cop and a psychologist and decide whether he should keep his guns. But he can get his guns back if he's willing to go for a month in a hospital, a mental wing of a hospital, and talk to somebody and let them decide. We're not trying to take your guns away. I watched a movie, Dodge City. We're not trying to take your guns away. You just can't carry them in town.
No.
And that was back then. They, limited guns.
Yeah, we don't let people own grenades. We don't let them own, poisonous bacteria and viruses. We don't let them own, small nuclear weapons. I mean, why are we letting? I don't get it. I just don't get it. Corky, thank you for the call. It's 22 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a moment. Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out. Welcome back. 23 minutes past the hour. Ron DeSantis is pushing legislation right now in the Florida Senate that would allow the governor to conceal from taxpayers and the press what he's up to. That if he goes to another state, his travel can be concealed. If he meets with lobbyists or big dollar donors, that can be concealed. That even it would this is a quote, the bill, this is according to Jason Garcia, a reporter with the Orlando Sentinel. He writes, it would carve a new exemption in Florida's public records laws for records related to travel by the governor. This exemption would even apply to, quote, personal information unrelated to the official duties of the protected person. And the restriction would also reportedly apply retroactively to trips DeSantis has already taken in the past, visitor logs of guests that he entertains in the governor's mansion. This guy is behaving more like a little emperor every single day. I got a great geeky science for you here. Have you ever eaten kimchi? Kimchi is fermented cabbage with lots of spices in it. I love kimchi. It's a Korean staple food. It's very, very common in Korea. It's kind of the Korean version of sauerkraut, which is German, I believe, in its origin. And it's a fermented food, so it's like really good for you. It's good for your gut bacteria, and we're learning now that there's an association between gut bacteria and everything from depression to obesity. And for more than 1,000 years, the traditional way to make kimchi is inside a pot, an earthenware vessel called an onggi, O-N-G-G-I. And now they're making it in like glass jars and things like that, but it just isn't quite the same, and nobody could figure out why. So a group of scientists looked into this. And what they discovered was that the kimchi made in the onggis, in these porcelain pots, ceramic pots, had greater acidity, more antioxidant activity, higher numbers of lactic acid bacteria, and slower growth of bad-tasting bacteria. Why? Well, it turns out that the pores, that the walls of the onggi are stippled with tiny micropores. This is just, the nature of pottery, basically. And the pores allow the pottery to exhale some of the carbon dioxide produced by fermentation, creating an ideal environment for lactic acid bacteria to flourish. And that's the good bacteria for you that you want. So I guess the story is, if you're going to get kimchi, get it that was made in the onggis, the O-N-G-G-I-S, or if you're going to try and make it yourself, you get these porcelain pots. They make special porcelain pots just for this. And I wonder how this applies to sauerkraut. I've never known anybody who made their own sauerkraut. Louise tried it once years ago, but I don't recall any of the details about that. But I wonder if sauerkraut is made better in a porcelain pot as opposed to glass or metal or something like that. I'm guessing it is, but maybe give me a shout. I'll be back with your phone calls on the other side of the break. Also, I want to give you the statistics on the toxicity of some medicines, including mifepristone. Stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be right back. It's 27 minutes past the hour. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Hidden History of American Healthcare, Why Sickness Bankrupts You and Makes Others Insanely Rich by me. I wrote this book. This is from the introduction, the title, How a Single-Payer Healthcare Systems Help Stop COVID-19. Healthcare systems can be national security systems. Just ask anyone from Taiwan. From January 20th, 2020, the United States, or on January 20, 2020, the United States recorded its first known case of COVID-19 infection. The following day, Taiwan got their first one too. By the end of April, over 1 million Americans were infected with the virus. But Taiwan had recorded only 388 infections, and their last case of local transmission was on April 12th. A few had arrived on aircraft from other countries. All were contained by quarantine. As of this writing in September 2020, there hadn't been a single new case or a single death in Taiwan since April. The economy never shut down and, as of this writing, was projected to have grown nearly 2% in 2020. Business, restaurants, theaters, and sports events were all open. Life was back to normal, albeit a mask-wearing normal. And it was made possible by their national single-payer healthcare system and their citizens' willingness to do their bit for the collective good. Back in the 1980s, Taiwan was on the edge of moving toward a democracy after a military coup in the 1960s. And about 40% of Taiwanese families did not have health insurance. If somebody in a family got sick, the cost of care often wiped out that family, and demands for reform were loud across the nation. Yue Reinhardt was a German-born healthcare economist married to a Taiwanese woman, and he attended a conference on healthcare in Taipei in 1989. His presentation impressed representatives of the government in attendance, and while he was still in town for the conference, they asked him for his best suggestion for a national healthcare system. He and his wife went back to their hotel and discussed the issue in depth, finally deciding that a single-payer national system would be the most cost-effective, efficient, and comprehensive program possible. He shared his thoughts with the government representatives, and the next day he left Taiwan to go back to Princeton, where he was an economic professor. 6 months later, though, a representative of Taiwan's government called him to say that they were going to take up his suggestion and asked him to help craft their healthcare program. He enthusiastically agreed, and by 1995, Taiwan had instituted one of the world's best single-payer healthcare systems. Today, everybody in Taiwan is fully covered for doctor and hospital services. Everybody has a driver's license-like healthcare card, which accesses their entire medical history. They can book a doctor's appointment on any computer terminal in the country, and the entire cost of the system is a bit more than 6% of Taiwan's GDP. For comparison, in the United States, healthcare consumes 24% of our GDP, because there is no insurance company intermediaries sucking profits off the system in Taiwan. When COVID-19 hit, Taiwan chose not to use the blunt force technique of shutting down their economy and locking people in. Instead, they took on the coronavirus with an aggressive nationwide test and contact trace program tied into the National Health Service database. Every infected person was identified and put into a comfortable quarantine, and every person he or she had come into contact with, even very marginal contacts, were also tested and their contacts traced. By April, just a bit more than 2 months after the first case surfaced, the country had the coronavirus isolated and completely under control. By quarantining inbound visitors to the nation island of 23 million, they were able, as of this writing, to keep it that way. Maintaining public health is one of the most important functions of any nation's healthcare system. Because America's is so fragmented, it's inconceivable that our nation could respond to an epidemic, a pandemic, or another public health disaster with the speed and elegance of Taiwan or any of the world's other nations with single-payer Medicare for all types of systems. It's like Stockholm Syndrome, a friend who's a psychotherapist said, describing the way that Americans have clung for more than 5 generations to a for-profit health insurance system, while the rest of the world figured out how to provide health care to all their citizens at a much lower price. People know it and have become familiar with it, she added. They just can't imagine anything else. It's probably the largest con job ever perpetrated on the American people, one that has cost trillions of dollars and millions of lives. It's been going on since the 1940s. If it were a scientific experiment, it would have been shut down by the ethics review panels generations ago. This experiment in providing health care via a for-profit insurance system has led to the deaths of more Americans than we lost in World War II. Every year, over 500,000 Americans go bankrupt, often losing everything they've worked their entire lives for because somebody in their family got sick. That's 500,000 families a year, every year, for the past few decades. And the coronavirus, of course, has only made things worse. Perhaps most galling, this massive ripoff is costing our entire nation and each of us individually a fortune. Insurance premiums right now make up 22% of all taxable payroll, well above what the cost of Medicare for all would be at around 14% when first put into place, dropping down to around 10% within a few years as previously uninsured people get their health needs up to date. As the health insurance, drug, and hospital parasites push their suckers deeper and deeper into our body politic, spending on health care by Americans went up 25% between 2000 and 2014. The book, The Hidden History of American Health Care by Thom Hartmann. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So everybody knows that George Santos is from a district that Joe Biden won by 16 points, New York's 3rd district, although there was a kind of a gerrymandering, or excuse me, a reapportionment thing that happened there. But it's generally a Democratic district, and if Santos falls, there's probably going to be a Democratic replacement. But that's just the beginning of the story. David Vallejo in California's 22nd district, for example, represents a district that Biden carried by 16 points. Young Kim in California's 40th, Biden carried by 15 points. Mike Garcia in California's 27th, Biden carried by 18 points. Biden carried by 11 points, Oregon's 5th, Lori Chavez Duremer. Brian Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania's 1st, Biden carried it by 14 points. I've got a whole video that lists all of these. There's 18 of them that should be easy pickups for the Democrats in 2024. It's over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. Okay, mifepristone, if I'm saying it right, does have side effects. There's a reason why it's a prescription drug. About every 1 million people who use it, about 5 people die from it. So that's, it's a not insignificant number of people who die. But for every 1 million people who use penicillin, 20 people die from it. For every 1 million people who use Viagra, 49 people die from it. So let's see. Viagra kills 49 out of 1 million people. Mifepristone kills 5 out of 1 million people. Which one should we be talking about making illegal or tightening restrictions on? Gee. Of course, who uses which? I wonder if that has something to do with it. All righty, picking up your calls. Beth in Valparaiso, Indiana. Hey, Beth, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Good to talk to you again. I don't mean to be... now, first of all, let me say I do agree with you that we're on the fourth turning thing. I agree with that we're on a cyclical turn. We've been trying to change for a while now, and it's really getting intense. And that's a good thing. And I also am somewhat hopeful as well. But just to be Debbie Downer for a minute, you keep asking the question over the last few weeks, how do these guys think they're going to get elected in the Republican Party? I'm going to tell you how they think. When they look at things, let me look at things from a different perspective, just to scare us a little, because I do believe that the guy that called in and said we're in the middle of like a cold civil war is absolutely correct. And here's the thing. Biden won the election because of about roughly 50,000 votes in 3 states, right? Georgia, Arizona, and Wisconsin. Those states are all controlled by Republican legislatures at this point, okay? And really crazy legislatures, especially in Wisconsin and Georgia. So you've got, well, they're all crazy, actually. But the point is, what they're looking at for 2024 is we can probably win the presidential election because all we got to do is more voter suppression, more of what we've been doing. They're probably going to come up with some last-minute things in those states. And so we really are still on a knife's edge as far as the electoral votes and all that.
I agree.
Number two is that the Democrats are falling down on the job in the sense that these young folks are coming out because of reproductive choice and guns. And there's still, as the Wisconsin election proved, because all the initiatives were like kind of anti-democratic, and they all won. And it shows you those initiatives, if you look at them, I think show that we haven't won the economic argument. People still think that tax cuts and Reaganomics is okay. It all still sounds good to them. And the Democrats are, they take funding from a lot of the same sources, most of them do, that some of the Republicans do. So there's a reticence to really attack the underpinnings of the conservative, idiotic philosophy that is ruining our wages. Now, luckily, the young people are catching on to that, too, with unionization that's coming up. But we're really on a knife's edge with that. And there's one more thing I wanted to say, and now I'm forgetting what it was. But anyway, I'll probably think of it right after I hang up. But I just wanted to say they're thinking that they can double down and keep going on this. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Also, the Senate is up for grabs, and we're going to have a tough time keeping the Senate this round. Yeah. So let's just look at a worst-case scenario. We lose the Senate. We lose the presidency. If that happens, because right now, we're still a year and a half out, but right now, even with Donald Trump under indictment, the statistics from last week's polls at 538 say that Biden only beats Trump by 2 points. So we're on a razor's edge. We've got to all remain really active. And if they get in, what they're going to do is you could say, well, the young people are going to react to that if they get in. Yes, they are, but then they're going to come up with the stuff Trump's been talking about, which is brutal repression of protest.
Yes.
And it could get real ugly. So I hope that we really are communicating all of our good messages. That we need to really attack the entire underpinnings of this conservative philosophy and flush it down the toilet, because it's been bothering us for over 50 years.
Yeah. I can't disagree with anything you said, Beth, and I think it's a good analysis. And these people are playing for keeps, and they're deadly serious, and they've got billions and billions of dollars behind them. And they view an egalitarian democracy as a threat to their oligarchy, and it is actually.
It sure is.
We have to acknowledge that. Yeah, absolutely. Beth, thank you. Thank you very much for a clear, lucid analysis. Lawrence in Berkeley, California. Hey, Lawrence, what's on your mind today?
Yeah. Hi, Tom. First of all, I want to say it's wonderful listening to you to find out which books to read. But okay, my real point is I wanted to talk about the election in Chicago of Brandon Johnson as mayor, because it's not only a great occasion of hope, but it's also a direction for us to go in the future. And the reason is that Mr. Johnson, his victory against the opponent who was much more better financed and also backed by the establishment Democrats there, his victory was due to a coalition between unions and community organizing.
Yeah.
He himself had been a teacher and then an organizer in the teachers' union. And at the same time, there were many people, they're constantly trying to shut down schools in Chicago and many other places. And also, as his opponent wanted to do, transfer them into private schools.
Right.
But there was a huge community organizing movement to keep the schools open as public schools. And those two coalesced. Now, that is the secret for Democrats to win elections, because if we can get unions and, more and more union organizing, and those unions are being backed by community organizing, there's no way we can lose. Because the reason that people have all these backward ideas is that they go to church, they go to all these personal organizations and get it from their friends. Well, we have to create new organizations where people will get new ideas that will be of obvious benefit to them. And it has to be in person. It won't happen online. But if we can combine union organizing with community organizing, that way the Democrats will win.
I agree. We have to have more people in unions to begin with. But I mean, people look at countries like France, for example, where all these people are out in the streets and how did all those people get out in the streets? Well, you've got, probably 70% of the population is a member of a union.
And unions act as, the nexus for political organizing in most countries, most other countries. I believe the United States has the lowest union density of any developed country in the world. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. And you've got, Finland the other day, I was doing a piece on Finland, and they're like 85%, I think, union density. 85% of all people are represented by a union. It was in my article a couple of days ago. So I'm with you. Right. I'm with you, Lawrence. It's a big deal, and we need to really be pushing it. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate the analysis. Rick in Dallas, Texas. Hey, Rick, what's on your mind today?
Hey, great to be on. It's my first time calling in.
Thank you.
I just wanted to mention that I know it's not the end of the world. The DNC has made their decision to have the convention in Chicago, but I just have a different take. I think they've made a mistake. I would have liked to have seen them have it in Georgia, Atlanta, because, first I think of everything that we've been seeing happening in the South. I think that there is an opportunity for Democrats to reach more Southern voters. Democrats have a majority in the Senate because of Georgia, with Raphael Warnock and Ossoff, and certainly the big battle this past fall between Warnock and Walker.
Yeah.
And I just think that this would have been an opportunity to reward Georgia.
I agree.
For the effort.
And there was a big push to make Atlanta the seat of the new. I have no idea what the backroom machinations were in this thing. I
agree, and I will say, as an African American, I think it's a safe thing to say that black people are the backbone of the Democrat Party. When black people turn out in big numbers, Democrats win.
Yeah.
And Atlanta, for much of the black community, is the center, I would argue, of black culture. And I say all that to say, I just think there was an opportunity to have that convention in Atlanta. They just had it in the Midwest, in Wisconsin, in 2020. So, again, it's not the end of the world, but I wish I would have been in the room. I would have really made the case to have it in Georgia. And thank you for
and I would have agreed with you, Rick. I absolutely would have agreed with you. I think your analysis is absolutely accurate. Thank you so much for the call. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. It's 45 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Speaking the truth, the GOP, the billionaires, and the multinational corporations would really rather you didn't know all about. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Colette in Wamak, Oregon. I've never heard of Wamak, Oregon.
Yeah.
Wamak, okay.
It's in the foothills of Mount Hood on the east side.
Oh, that's pretty country. So what's up, Colette?
Well, you were wondering about sauerkraut. Oh, by the way, I've been listening to you since you were on the river you lived on the river in the boathouse.
Yeah, in the Willamette. That was years ago, yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah, I've been listening to you a long time, so we're living in strange times now, but
indeed,
some things don't change, and me making sauerkraut is one of them.
Okay,
and I
so
learned
tell me
that
about it.
from my German grandmother.
Tell me about it.
So, yeah, I think a vessel, we like the crocks, the old-fashioned crock, and the amount of salt you put in and the kind of cabbage you use will determine some of the flavor. But I've made it in plastic and in glass and in crocks, and I like the crocks the best, just the old-fashioned crocks.
Mm-hmm. Well, apparently there's some good science for that. So how do you do this, Colette? Do you just toss the cabbage in with some salt and water and put a piece of cardboard over it and come back in a week? Or, I mean, what? I have no idea.
So the way I do it is I get really good cabbage from the Willamette Valley, these big baldies, they call them, and you slice it up I like it thin, and you put some in the crock and you pound it down with a pounder, and then you spread a little salt and pound it down. Then you put another layer of cabbage and a layer of salt, and just however much you have, and then you put a weighted plate on it to keep the cabbage down, and pretty soon it starts perking up and you'll see bubbles. And I put a tea towel over it just like my grandma did, and taste it once in a while, and it usually takes 7-8 weeks.
And it's you don't add any kind of bacteria or what's
it
it
makes
called, must?
its own.
Yeah, so it's just working off the bacteria in the air.
Yeah, and I really like it. We really eat it every year, so it's good for you.
Yeah. Do they sell? Do they sell crock pots that are specifically for making fermented foods in, or specifically sauerkraut in this case?
Yeah, it's actually my grandmother she put pickles in one crock and kraut in another one, and never even canned them or anything. We just ate out of the crocks.
Do you make pickles the same way?
I don't. My grandmother did. I put mine in jars.
Yeah, but you just let them sit in salt and water, or in a crock pot or something like that.
The pickles?
Yeah. Yeah, I've never made pickles
no, I
either.
just can them. I can them in vinegar.
Yeah.
Mixture of vinegar and water and pickling spices.
But you don't use vinegar when you make sauerkraut? Because vinegar is already fermented. I mean, that's been fermented by from apple juice.
Yeah, it's just sauerkraut is made out of cabbage and salt, and that's it. Some people put some flavoring in it, but it's just kraut and salt.
Huh. Okay. Well, I thank you very much. I'm fascinated by this because it's really, really healthy stuff. I mean, it's supposed to be really. It
really
good for
is.
You. Yeah. Well, Colette, thank you so much for the call, and thanks for listening to us all these years. I appreciate it. Good talking with you. We'll be right back. It's 10 minutes before the hour. We'll be in a few seconds. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So remember when Chad Wolf was the acting secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, which, by the way, was an illegal position because you had to be Senate confirmed, and he wasn't. But nonetheless, he was there. Well, and this was in 2020, the summer of 2020, and there were these protests going on here in Portland and all around the country around the murder of George Floyd. And Trump had sent unmarked, armed federal police into Portland to literally kidnap people off the streets. And he wanted a justification to keep these people in jail. And he had ordered the Department of Homeland Security to quote, generate evidence of financial ties between protesters in custody, an effort that, had they not failed, would have seemingly served to legitimize President Trump's false claims about Antifa, end quote, from Ron Wyden's report. This is amazing. Make no mistake, if Trump ever gets the power again, he will weaponize our police systems. There's a whole video about it over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. Minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Picking up your calls. Vladimir in Concord, California. Hey, Vladimir, what's on your mind today? Thanks for listening to Sirius XM.
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. Yeah, I just wanted to basically talk about the shooting in Louisville real quick. The report that came out today, at least I read it today, that the shooter had only purchased his weapon recently, I think within the last week or 10 days or something like that.
Yes.
And the shooter had come out witnesses, had come out and said that the shooter had exhibited signs of being suicidal, had told them he was suicidal, had even said he's considering, harm, to himself or others. I don't know the details of that. I'm not 100% sure. But that screams to me that this all could have been prevented with simple red flag laws that Republicans keep fighting against. And the fact that their solution is to do nothing and to claim that, laws won't prevent these types of things from happening again. Like an assault weapons ban could have prevented this person from buying an AR.
Yep.
And a red flag law could have gotten his weapon confiscated and gotten him potential mental health help.
Yeah, which is the third piece of this that we don't have, Vladimir, which is that we don't have widespread, easy, affordable access to mental health care in the United States. It's another failing of our system.
Exactly.
And that tracks back to Ronald Reagan shutting down, mental hospitals around the country. I'm serious. That's when our homelessness crisis began.
No. I 100% agree with you, Tom. The reason I laugh is because my friends know me as the chief Ronald Reagan hater of my group.
I get it.
I can trace so many of the issues that are plaguing our country today to Ronald Reagan and his presidency.
Yeah. Well, I just wrote a book about it, The Hidden History of Neoliberalism, How Reaganism Gutted America is the title of the book. I mean, it's my wife threatens that when I die, she's going to put, it all started with Reagan on my tombstone.
You know what? I'm pretty sure my friends will say the same thing about me.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
But the other thing I was thinking about too is just two things real quick. One, there was a message from Ted Cruz, who basically, in his push to arm teachers and to post more armed security guards at schools, likened schools to banks. And he said, we put armed security in banks to protect our money. Why don't we put armed security in schools to protect our children?
Yeah, he just said that like a week ago. I mean, that aged really well, right?
Well, exactly. Here's a bank, and I think as of this morning, 5 people are now dead, confirmed dead as of this incident. So,
and there's a police officer with a bullet in his brain.
Yeah, exactly. I'm at such a loss for what to do in this country anymore, because
vote Democratic.
Children are dying daily. Exactly.
There's just no alternative. We have to vote Democratic, and they are doing everything they can. I mean, they're literally purging millions of voters off the voting rolls every single month. I don't know if it's a million every month, but I know that it's millions every year of people who are being purged off voting rolls, particularly people in college towns, people who are in cities with large black populations. Now you've got the governor of Texas. He wants legislation that will allow him to throw out the election results in Houston, the largest city and the largest black population in Texas. It's just, we are under assault. Democracy is under assault, and they are not going to give up or go away. And we have to push through it. We've got to. This election coming up is the most critical one of our lifetime. Vladimir, I need to move along, but thank you for the call. It's spot on. Mark in Jacksonville, Florida. Hey, Mark, you're last up. What's on your mind today?
Okay, real quick, Tom. I retired a couple of years ago after 20 years as an officer and an agent for a very well-known labor union. And also, I think the problems that we're facing today in this country are 3 things related all together: religion, the Confederacy, and money. I live in the South. These people are crazy. They're uneducated. They want to live in the old days. If you're not part of the good old boy system around here, being religious and their money and their Republican beliefs, you have to fight for everything around here. And Ron DeSantis is actually making Rick Scott look like a half-decent governor, I'm sad to say.
Yeah, Rick Scott, the Medicare fraudster.
Yeah, but, every day, like you said a few minutes ago, he does something every single day, because you go to bed at night thinking, oh, tomorrow's going to be a quiet day, and then he does something else. And I hear your music. Good to talk to you, Tom.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mark. Good talking to you, too. And thank you for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us, and that includes you. So get out there, get active. There's so much we can do, and that we have to do. I mean, like I said, this election coming up in a year and a half is probably going to determine the fate and future of this country more than any we've had to this point. So tag you're it. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance and threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Hidden History of American Healthcare: Why Sickness Bankrupts You and Makes Others Insanely Rich by me. I wrote this book. This is from the introduction, the title, How a Single-Payer Healthcare Systems Help Stop COVID-19. Healthcare systems can be national security systems. Just ask anyone from Taiwan. From January 20th, 2020, the United States, or on January 20, 2020, the United States recorded its first known case of COVID-19 infection. The following day, Taiwan got their first one too. By the end of April, over 1 million Americans were infected with the virus. But Taiwan had recorded only 388 infections, and their last case of local transmission was on April 12th.